we're here finally. Okay, so as usual, I apologize for being late, as usual, but let me make sure that the sound is working. Cante fantastique. There it is. Okay. So yeah, my streaming software, the servers were down for a while. I was ready to go like 2 hour, well, maybe like an hour and a half ago, and I couldn't get online. So hi ho neighbor. Oh no, you cannot hear me. Hang on. Let me look. I just checked. You should be able to hear me. I'm speaking. 2x5? Oh no. Um, I haven't changed anything. I don't want to say it's on your end, but I have had that issue where, yeah. I don't know what to tell you. um, well, cause it is. My mic is like in the yellow when I'm speaking at almost normal volume. So I don't want to blast your ears either. So um he's 6x5? I don't know. Well, I don't. I am a lady, so I must speak quietly. That's not true at all. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I might have to redo things at some point. But for now, we're gonna have to leave it the way it is. I think. Cause yeah, cause I did. I got started late. The servers were down, I guess. So now they're working for now. Knock on wood, fingers crossed. So we're gonna get into it. We're gonna start going. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it and get the gist of it and everything. So we're back with Fantasmagoriana, Tales of the Dead. Dun 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 dun. We're on number 3, The Death's Head. And this one is slightly shorter, and then it's a longer one for the second one. You turned him down and me up. Okay, sounds good. I apologize that you have to bring it down in order to hear my gratingness. But I hope it is worth it. I hope it is worth it. The last 2 stories were good. So, you thought this was Flight Sim? No, it's not. Thursdays we do reading. I'm sorry. It's Tuesdays we do flying. Only right before check ride do I do multiple days a week of flying. But in normally I just do the once a week. So I apologize. I'm sorry. You don't read. Okay, that's okay. Good night. Good night. Have a good enjoy continuum. And see you on Tuesday then. Horror games on Sunday if you're interested. Otherwise, yes, flying on Tuesday. Sorry. All right, so we're getting started. The Death's Head. What guilt can equal violations of the dead? The dead, how sacred? Young's Night Thoughts. All right. And I guess I could say, I mean, like, I'm the one reading, but, all right. Make sure it's good. All right. Can you see my cursor? Cursor is good. All right. The beauty of the evening, which succeeded to a very sultry day, tempted Colonel Keyholm to sit, surrounded by his little family, on the stone bench placed before the door of the noble mansion he had recently purchased. In order to become acquainted by degrees with his new tenants, he took pleasure in questioning on their occupations and conditions the greater part of those who passed by. He alleviated their little sufferings by his advice, as well as by his bounty. His family enjoyed particular pleasure in seeing the little inn situated in front of the chateau, which, instead of presenting a disgusting object, as when the late owner lived there, became each succeeding day better and more orderly. Okay. Their pleasure was heightened from the circumstance that the new landlord, who had been many years a servant in the family, was loud in praises of its amended condition, and delighted himself in his new calling, with the idea of the happy prospects it held forth to himself, his wife, and children. Formerly, though the road was greatly frequented, nobody ventured to pass a night at this inn, but now each day there was a succession of travelers, carriages were constantly seen at the door or in the courtyard, and the air of general satisfaction of each party, as they proceeded on their route, incontestably proved to the landlord, who always, hat in hand, was at the door of their carriages as they drove off, that his efforts to give the various travelers satisfaction were completely successful. A moving scene of this nature had just disappeared, which furnished conversation for the moment, when a whimsical equipage, which arrived from another quarter, attracted the attention of the colonel and his family. A long carriage, loaded with trunks and all sorts of luggage, and drawn by two horses, whose form and color presented the most grotesque contrast imaginable, but which in point of meagreness were an excellent match, was succeeded by a second long and large vehicle, which they had, most probably at the expense of the adjacent forest, converted into a traveling thicket. The four steeds which drew it did not in any respect make a better appearance than the two preceding. But the colonel and his family were still more struck by the individuals who filled this second carriage. It was a strange medley of children and grown persons, closely wedged together, but not one of their countenances bore the slightest mark of similarity of ideas. Discontent, aversion, and hatred were legible in the face of each of these sunburnt strangers. It was not a family, but a collection of individuals which fear or necessity kept together without uniting. The colonel's penetrating eye led him to discover thus much, though the distance was considerable. He at length saw descend from the back part of the carriage a man of better appearance than the others. At something which he said, the whole troop turned their eyes towards the inn. They assumed an air of greater content, and appeared a little better satisfied. The first carriage had already stopped at the door of the inn, while the second was passing the chateau, and the extremely humble salutations from the passengers in the latter seemed to claim the goodwill of the colonel and his family. The second carriage had scarcely stopped ere the troop were out of it, each appearing anxious to quit those next to whom they had been sitting with all possible speed. The spruce and agile manner in which they leapt out of the vehicle left no doubt on the mind what their profession was. They could be none other than rope dancers. The colonel remarked that, notwithstanding the humble salutations they had made, he did not think they would exhibit in these parts, but according to appearances they would proceed to the capital with all possible dispatch, as it was hardly to be expected that they would be delayed a single day by the very trivial profit to be expected from exhibiting in a mere country village. "We have," said he, "seen the worst side of these gentry, without the probability of ascertaining whether they have anything to recommend them to our notice." His wife was on the point of expressing her dislike to all those tricks which endanger the neck, when the person whom they had observed as being superior to the rest advanced towards them, and after making a low bow, asked permission to remain there a few days. The colonel was unable to refuse this request, as he shewed him a passport properly signed. "I beg you," replied the colonel, "to declare most positively to your company that every equivocal action is punished in my villages, as I am anxious to avoid all possibility of quarrels. Do not in the least alarm yourself, monsieur. An extremely severe discipline is kept up in my troop, which has in some respects the effect of a secret police among ourselves. All can answer for one, and one can answer for all. Each is bound to communicate any misconduct on the part of another to me, and is always rewarded for such communication. But, on the contrary, if he omits so to do, he is severely punished." The colonel's lady could not conceal her aversion to such a barbarous regulation, which the stranger perceiving, shrugged his shoulders. "We must all accommodate our ideas to our condition. I have found that if persons of this stamp are not so treated, there is no possibility of governing them, and you may the more confidently rely on my vigilance, as I had the happiness of being born in this place, and in consequence feel a double obligation, first to the place of my birth, secondly to his worship." "Were you born here?" demanded the colonel's wife with surprise. "Yes, my lady. My father was Scherster, the schoolmaster, who died lately, but I call myself Calzolaro, finding that my profession succeeds better under an Italian than a German name." This explanation redoubled the interest the colonel and his lady already felt for this man, who appeared to have received a tolerable education. They knew that the schoolmaster, whose profession had been pretty lucrative, owing to the numerous population of the village, had died worth some considerable property, but that he had named a distant female relation as his sole heiress, leaving his only son an extremely scanty pittance. "My father," continued Calzolaro, "did not behave to me as he ought, and I cannot but think I should be justified in availing myself of some important informalities in his will, and endeavoring to set it aside, which is my present intention. But excuse, I pray you, my having tired your patience with relations to which the conversation has involuntarily given rise. I have still one more request to make. Permit me to return you my best thanks for your gracious condescension, and to shew you some of the exercises for which my troop is famous. The colonel acceded to Calzolaro's request, and a day was fixed for the performance. Calzolaro went that very evening to the village pastor and communicated to him his intentions relative to his father's will. The worthy minister condemned such procedure, and endeavored to convince Calzolaro that his father's anger was just. Picture to yourself, young man, said he, a father who has grown old in an honest profession, and who rejoices in having a son to whom he can leave it. Added to which, this son has great talents, a good understanding, and is well disposed. It was natural that the father should use every possible exertion to obtain for this son his own situation at his death. The son is in truth nominated to succeed him. The father, thinking himself secure from misfortune, feels quite happy. It was at this period that the son, enticed by harebrained companions, gave up a certain and respectable, though not very brilliant, provision. My dear Scherster, if, when shaking off the salutary yoke, and quitting your venerable father to ramble over the world, you could lightly forget the misery it would occasion him, you ought at least, in the present instance, to behave differently, or, in plain terms, I shall say you are a good-for-nothing fellow. Did not your father, even after this, do all he could to reclaim you? But you were deaf to his remonstrances. Because the connection which I had formed imposed obligations on me, from which I could not free myself, as from a garment of which one is tired. For had I then been my own master, as I now am— Here let us stop, if you please. I have only one request to make of you. You ought, from respect to your father's memory, not to dispute his will. This conversation, and the venerable air of the pastor, had a little shaken Calzolaro's resolutions. But the next day they returned with double force, for he heard several persons say that shortly before his death his father was heard to speak of him with great bitterness. This discourse rendered him so indignant that he would not even accede to a proposal of accommodation with the heiress made to him by the pastor. The colonel tried equally, but without success, to become a mediator, and at length determined to let the matter take its course. He, however, assisted at the rehearsals made by the troupe, and took so much pleasure in the performances prepared for the amusement of him and his family by Calzolaro that he engaged him to act again, and invited several of his neighbors to witness them. Calzolaro said to him on this occasion, "You have as yet seen very trifling proofs of our abilities, but do not fancy that I am an idle spectator and merely stand by to criticize. I, as well as each individual of my troupe, have a sphere of action, and I reserve myself to give you, before we take our leave, some entertaining experiments in electricity and magnetism." The colonel then told him that he had recently seen in the capital a man who exhibited experiments of that sort, which had greatly delighted him. And above all, he had been singularly astonished by his powers of ventriloquism. "It is precisely in that particular point," replied Calzolaro, "that I think myself equal to anyone, be they whom they may." "I am very glad of it," answered the colonel, "but what would produce the most astonishing effect on those who have never heard a ventriloquist would be a dialogue between the actor and a death's head. The man of whom I made mention gave us one." "If you command it, I can undertake it." "Delightful!" exclaimed the colonel, and Calzolaro having given some unequivocal proofs of his powers as a ventriloquist, the colonel added, "The horror of the scene must be augmented by every possible means. For instance, we must hang the room with black, the lights must be extinguished, we must fix on midnight. It will be a species of Fantasmagoria dessert after supper. It will be a species of Fantasmagoria dessert after supper. An unexpected spectacle. We must contrive to throw the audience into a cold perspiration, in order that when the explanation takes place, they may have ample reason to laugh at their fears. For if all succeeds, no one will be exempt from a certain degree of terror." Calzolaro entered into the project, and promised that nothing should be neglected to make it successful. They furnished a closet, and hung it with black. The colonel's wife was the only one admitted to their confidence, as they could rely on her discretion. Her husband had even a little altercation on the subject with her. She wished that for the ventriloquist scene they should use the model of a head in plaster, which her son used to draw from, whereas the colonel maintained that they must have a real skull. Otherwise, said he, the spectator's illusion will speedily be at an end. But after they have heard the death's head speak, we will cause it to be handed round, in order to convince them that it is in truth but a skull. And where can we procure this skull? Asked the colonel's wife. The sexton will undertake to provide us with it. And whose corpse will you thus disturb for a frivolous amusement? How sentimental you are, replied Keelholm, who did not consider the subject in so serious a light. We may easily see you are not accustomed to the field of battle, where no further respect is paid to the repose of the dead than suits the convenience of the laborer in the fields where they are buried. God preserve me from such a spectacle. Oops. Exclaimed the colonel's lady in quitting them, when she perceived her husband was insensible to her representations. According to the orders which he received, the sexton one night brought a skull in good preservation. The morning of the day destined for the representation, Calzolaro went into the adjacent forest to rehearse the dialogue which he was to have with the death's head. He considered in what way to place the head, so as to avoid all suspicion of the answers given by it being uttered by a person concealed. In the meanwhile, the pastor arrived at the spot from a neighboring hamlet, where he had been called to attend a dying person, and believing that the interposition of Providence was visible in this accidental meeting, the good man stopped, in order once again to exhort Calzolaro to agree to an accommodation with the heiress. I yesterday, said he, received a letter from her in which she declares that, rather than any disrespect should be paid to your father's last will and testament, she will give up to you half the inheritance to which she is thereby entitled. Ought you not to prefer this to a process at law, the issue of which is doubtful, and which at all events will never do you credit? Calzolaro persisted in declaring that the law should decide between him and the testator. The poor young man was not in a state to see in a proper point of view his father's conduct towards him. The pastor, finding all his representations and entreaties fruitless, left him. Calzolaro proceeded slowly to the inn, to assign to each of his band their particular part. He told them that he should not be with them, but, notwithstanding, he should have an eye over their conduct. He was not willing to appear as the manager of these mountebanks to the party assembled at the colonel's, thinking that if he appeared for the first time in the midnight scene as an entire stranger, it would add still more to the marvelous. The tumblers' tricks and rope dancing were performed to admiration, and those of the spectators whose constant residence in the country prevented their having witnessed similar feats were the most inclined to admire and praise the agility of the troupe. The little children in particular were applauded. The compassion excited by their unhappy destiny mingled with the approbation bestowed on them, and the ladies were subjects of envy in giving birth to the satisfaction depicted in the countenances of these little wretches by their liberal donations. The agility of the troupe formed the subject of general conversation the whole afternoon. They were even speaking in their praise after supper, when the master of the house said to the company assembled, I am rejoiced, my dear friends, to see the pleasure you have received from the little spectacle that I have been enabled to give you. My joy is so much the greater, since I find you doubting the possibility of things which are very natural, for I have it in my power to submit for your examination something of a very incomprehensible nature. At this very moment, I have in my house a person who entertains a most singular intercourse with the world of spirits, and who can compel the dead to answer his questions. Oh, exclaimed a lady, smiling, don't terrify us. You jest now, replied the colonel, but I venture to affirm your mirth will be a little changed when the scene takes place. I accept the challenge, answered the incredulous fair one. All the party was of her opinion, and declared themselves so openly and so loudly against the truth of these terrific scenes, that the colonel began to be really apprehensive for the effects likely to be produced by those he had prepared. He would have even relinquished his project if his guests, one and all, had not entreated him to the contrary. They even went further. They besought him not long to delay the wonderful things he promised. But the colonel, keeping his own counsel, feigned ignorance that they were laughing at him, and with a grave air declared that the experiment could not take place till midnight. The clock at length struck 12. The colonel gave his servants orders to place chairs facing the door of a closet, which had been hitherto kept shut. He invited the company to sit down, and gave orders for all the lights to be put out. While these preparations were making, he thus addressed the company. I entreat you, my friends, to abstain from all idle curiosity. The grave and solemn tone in which he uttered these words made a deep impression on the party, whose incredulity was not a little lessened by the striking of the clock, and the putting out the lights one after the other. Presently they heard from the closet facing them the hoarse and singular sounds by which it is pretended spirits are conjured up, and which were interrupted at intervals by loud strokes of a hammer. All on a sudden the door of the closet opened, and as by slow degrees the cloud of incense which filled it evaporated. They gradually discovered the black trappings with which it was hung, and an altar in the middle also hung with black drapery. On this altar was placed a skull, which cast its terrifying regards on all the company present. Meanwhile, the spectators' breathing became more audible and difficult, and their embarrassment increased in proportion as the vapor gave place to a brilliant light issuing from an alabaster lamp suspended from the ceiling. Many of them indeed turned their heads away in alarm on hearing a noise behind them, which, however, they discovered simply proceeded from some of the servants, whom the colonel had given permission to be present during the exhibition, at a respectful distance. After a moment of profound silence, Caltolaro entered. A long beard had so effectually altered his youthful appearance that though several of the spectators had previously seen him, they could not possibly recognize him under this disguise, and his oriental costume added so much to the deceit that his entrance had an excellent effect. In order that his art should impose the more, the colonel recommended to him a degree of haughtiness in addressing the company, and that he should not salute them according to any prescribed forms of politeness, but to announce himself in terms foreign from all ordinary modes of conversation. They both agreed that a mysterious jargon would best answer their purpose. In consequence of such determination, Caltolaro, assuming a deep, sepulchral tone, thus began. After our present state of existence, we are swallowed up in the obscure abyss which we call death, in order that we may become incorporated in an entirely new and peaceful state. It is in order to emancipate the soul from this state that the sublime arts are exercised, and to create among fools and weak persons the idea of its being impossible. The wise and learned pity them for their ignorance, in not knowing what is possible and impossible, true or false, light or dark, because they do not know and cannot comprehend the exalted spirits, who, from the silence of the vault and the grave, from the moldering bones of the dead, speak to the living in a voice no less formidable than true. As to you, who are now here assembled, listen to a word of advice. Avoid provoking by any indiscreet question the vengeance of the spirit, who at my command will be invisibly stationed beneath this human skull. Endeavor to moderate your fear. Listen to everything with calmness and submission, for I take under my especial care all those who are obedient, and only leave the guilty as a prey to the destruction they merit. The colonel remarked with secret satisfaction the impression produced on the company, hitherto so incredulous, by this pompous harangue. Everything succeeds better than I could have hoped, said he in an undertone to his wife, who was not at all amused by the performance, and who was only present to please her husband. Meanwhile, Caltolaro continued, Look on this pitiful and neglected head. My magic art has removed the bolts of the tomb to which it was consigned, and in which reposes a long line of princes. The owner of it is now actually there, rendering up to the spirits an exact account of the life he had led. Don't be alarmed, even though it should burst forth in terrible menaces against you, and against me his impotency will be manifest, as, spite of his former grandeur, he cannot resist the power I have over him, provided no culpable precipitation on your part interrupt the solemnity of my questions. He then opened a door of the closet hitherto concealed from the company, brought a chafing dish filled with red-hot coals, threw thereon some incense, and walked 3 times round the altar, pronouncing at each circle a spell. He then drew from its scabbard a sword which hung in his girdle, plunged it in the smoke issuing from the incense, and making frightful contortions of his face and limbs, pretended to endeavor to cleave the head, which, however, he did not touch. At last he took the head up on the point of his sword, held it up in the air before him, and advanced toward the spectators, a little moved. "Who art thou, miserable dust, that I hold at the point of my sword?" demanded Calzolaro, with a confident air and a firm voice. But scarcely had he uttered this question, when he turned pale, his arm trembled, his knees shook, his haggard eyes, which were fixed on the head, were horror-struck. He had hardly strength sufficient to place the head and the sword on the altar, ere he suddenly fell on the floor with every symptom of extreme terror. The spectators, frightened out of their wits, looked at the master of the house, who in his turn looked at them. No one seemed to know whether this was to be considered part of the scene, nor whether it was possible to explain it. The curiosity of the audience was raised to its utmost pitch. They waited still a considerable time, but no explanation took place. At length, Calzolaro, half raising himself, asked if his father's shadow had disappeared. Stupefaction succeeded astonishment. The colonel was anxious. Oh my gosh. Stupefaction succeeded astonishment. The colonel was anxious to know whether he was still attempting to impose on the company by a pretended dialogue with the death's head. Calzolaro answered that he would do anything, and that he would willingly submit to any punishment they chose to inflict on him for his frightful crime, but he entreated that they would instantly carry back the head to its place of repose. His countenance had undergone a complete change, and only resumed its wonted appearance on the colonel's wife acquiescing in his wish. She ordered the head to be instantly conveyed to the churchyard, and to be replaced in the grave. During this unexpected denouement, every eye was turned on Calzolaro. He, who not long ago was talking with so much emphasis and in such a lofty strain, could now scarcely draw his breath, and from time to time threw supplicating looks on the spectators, as if entreating them to wait patiently till he had recovered strength sufficient to continue his performance. The colonel informed them in the meanwhile of the species of jest that he had projected to play on them, and for the failure of which he could not at that moment account. At last, Calzolaro, with an abashed air, spoke as follows. "The spectacle which I designed to have given has terminated in a terrible manner for me, but happily for the honorable company present, I perceive they did not see the frightful apparition which caused me a temporary privation of my reason. Scarcely had I raised the death's head on the point of my sword, and had begun to address it, than it appeared to me in my father's features. And whether my ears deceived me or not, I am ignorant, neither do I know how I was restored to my senses, but I heard it say, 'Tremble, parricide, whom nothing can convert, and who wilt not turn to the path thou hast abandoned.' The very recollection produced such horror on Calzolaro's mind as to stop his respiration and prevent his proceeding. The colonel briefly explained to the spectators what appeared to them mysterious in his words, and then said to the penitent juggler, 'Since your imagination has played you so strange a trick, I exhort you in future to avoid all similar accidents, and to accept the arrangement proposed to you by the person whom your father has named as his heir.' 'No, monsieur,' answered he, 'no agreement, no bargain, else I shall only half fulfill my duty. Everything shall belong to this heiress, and the lawsuit shall be abandoned.' He, at the same time, declared that he was weary of the mode of life he had adopted, and that every wish of his father's should be fulfilled. The colonel told him that such a resolution compensated for what had failed in the evening's amusement. The company, however, did not cease making numberless inquiries of Calzolaro, many of which were very ludicrous. They were anxious to know, among other things, whether the head which had appeared to him resembled that of a corpse or a living being. 'It most probably belongs to a corpse,' he replied. 'I was so thunderstruck with the horrible effect of it that I cannot remember minutiae. Imagine an only son, with the point of a sword which he holds in his hand, piercing his father's skull. The bare idea is sufficient to deprive one of one's senses.' 'I did not believe,' answered the colonel, after having for some time considered Calzolaro, 'that the conscience of a man, who like you has rambled the world over, could still be so much overcome by the powers of imagination.' What? Monsieur, do you still doubt the reality of the apparition, though I am ready to attest it by the most sacred oaths? Your assertion contradicts itself. We have also our eyes to see what really exists, and nobody, excepting yourself, saw any other than a simple skull. That is what I cannot explain, but this I can add, that I am firmly persuaded, although even now I cannot account for my so thinking, that as sure as I exist, that head is actually and truly the head of my father. I am ready to attest it by my most solemn oath. To prevent your perjuring yourself, they shall instantly go to the sexton and learn the truth. Saying this, the colonel went out to give the necessary orders. He returned an instant afterwards, saying, "Here is another strange phenomenon. The sexton is in this house, but is not able to answer my questions." Anxious to enjoy the spectacle I was giving my friends, he mixed with some of my servants who, possessing the same degree of curiosity, had softly opened the door through which the chafing dish was conveyed. But at the moment of the conjurer falling on the floor, the same insensibility overcame the sexton, who even now has not recovered his reason, although they have used every possible method to restore him. One of the party said that, being subject to fainting himself, he constantly carried about him a liquor, the effect of which was wonderful in such cases, and that he would go and try it now on the sexton. They all followed him, but this did not succeed better than the methods previously resorted to. "This man must indeed be dead," said the person who had used the liquor without effect on him. The clock in the tower had just struck 1, and every person thought of retiring, but slight symptoms of returning life being perceptible in the sexton, they still remained. "God be praised," exclaimed the sexton, awaking. "He is at length restored to rest." "Who, old Dad?" said the colonel. "Our late schoolmaster." "What then? That head was actually his." "Alas, if you will only promise not to be angry with me, I will confess. It was his." The colonel then asked him how the idea of disturbing the schoolmaster's corpse in particular came into his head. "Owing to a diabolical boldness. It is commonly believed that when a child speaks to the head of its deceased parent at the midnight hour, the head comes to life again. I was anxious to prove the fact, but shall never recover from its effects. Happily, however, the head is actually restored to rest." They asked him how he knew it. He answered that he had seen it all the while he was in a state of lethargy, that as the clock struck 1, his wife had finished reinterring the head in its grave, and he described in the most minute manner how she held it. The curiosity of the company assembled was so much excited by witnessing these inexplicable events that they awaited the return of the servant, whom the colonel had dispatched to the sexton's wife. Everything had happened precisely as he described. The clock struck 1 at the very moment the head was laid in the grave. These events had produced to the spectators a night of much greater terrors than the colonel had prepared for them. Nay, even his imagination was raised to such a pitch that the least breath of wind or the slightest noise appeared to him as a forerunner to some disagreeable visitor from the world of spirits. He was out of his bed at dawn of day to look out of his window and see the occasion of the noise which at that hour was heard at the inn door. He saw the rope dancers seated in the carriage, about to take their departure. Caltolaro was not with them, but presently afterwards came to the side of the vehicle, where he took leave of them. The children seemed to leave him behind with regret. Oh, the carriage drove off, and the colonel made a signal to Caltolaro to come and speak to him. "I apprehend," said he to him, when he came in, "that you have taken entire leave of your troop. Well, monsieur, ought I not so to do? It appears to me a procedure in which you have acted with as little reflection as the one which tempted you first to join them. You ought rather to have availed yourself of some favorable occasion for withdrawing the little capital that you have in their funds. Do you then, Monsieur Colonel, forget what has happened to me, and that I could not have enjoyed another moment of repose in the society of persons who are only externally men? Every time I recall the scene of last night to my recollection, my very blood freezes in my veins. From this moment I must do all in my power to appease my father's shade, which is now so justly incensed against me. Without much effort, I have withdrawn myself from a profession which never had any great charms for me. Reflect only on the misery of being the chief of a troop, who, to earn a scanty morsel of bread, are compelled every moment to risk their lives, and even this morsel of bread not always attainable. Moreover, I know that the clown belonging to the troop, who is a man devoid of all sentiment, has for a long while aspired to become the chief. And I know that he has for some time been devising various means to remove me from this world. This is why we're afraid of clowns. Therefore, it appears to me that I have not been precipitate in relinquishing my rights to him for a trifling sum of money. I only feel for the poor children, and would willingly have purchased them, to save them from so unhappy a career. But he would not take any price for them. I have only one consolation, which is the hope that the inhuman treatment they will experience at his hands will induce them to make their escape and follow a better course of life. And what do you purpose doing yourself? I have told you that I shall retire to some obscure corner of Germany and follow the profession to which my father destined me. The colonel made him promise to wait a little, and if possible, he would do something for him. In the interim, the heiress to his father's property arrived, to have a conference on the subject with him. As soon as he had made known his intentions to her, she entreated him no longer to refuse half the inheritance, or at least to receive it as a voluntary gift on her part. The goodness, the sweetness of this young person, who was pretty also, so pleased Calzolaro that a short time afterwards he asked her hand in marriage. She consented to give it to him. And the colonel then exerted himself more readily in behalf of this man, who had already gained his favor. He fulfilled his wishes by sending him to a little property belonging to his wife, to follow the profession his father had fixed on for him. Ere he set off, Calzolaro resumed his German name of Schuster. The good pastor, who had so recently felt indignant at his obstinacy, gave the nuptial benediction to the happy couple in the presence of the colonel and his family, who on this occasion gave an elegant entertainment at the chateau. In the evening, a little after sunset, the bride and bridegroom were walking in the garden, at some little distance from the rest of the company, and appeared plunged in a deep reverie. All on a sudden, they looked at each other, for it seemed to them that someone took a hand of each and united them. They declared at least that the idea of this action having taken place came to them both so instantaneously and so involuntarily that they were astonished at it themselves. An instant afterwards, they distinctly heard these words: "May God bless your union," pronounced by the voice of Calzolaro's father. The bridegroom told the colonel, some time afterwards, that without these consolatory words, the terrible apparition which he saw on the memorable night would assuredly have haunted him all his life and have empoisoned his happiest moments. Very interesting, very interesting. I enjoyed that one. It was a lot subtler than the other two, but it was good. I wasn't sure. I assume the death's head is something specific, unless it is just straight up a skull, but I assume it is supposed to be somewhat of a symbol rather than just skull. And yeah, the way that it all came out was good. It was a little bittersweet. But yeah, it was good. It was cute. All right, we're gonna get on to the next one. Yes, that was a good run. It didn't take too long. Oh. I'm just gonna make sure everything's working still. Are we good? Perfect. It is a little behind, but we're gonna be okay with it. All right. Ow. Number 4, The Death Bride. She shall be such as walked your first queen's ghost. Shakespeare. She shall be such as walked your first queen's ghost. Oh. Oh, I think I know where this is going. All right, all right, all right. The summer had been uncommonly fine, and the baths crowded with company beyond all comparison, but still the public rooms were scarce ever filled, and never gay. The nobility and military associated only with those of their own rank, and the citizens contented themselves by slandering both parties. So many partial divisions necessarily proved an obstacle to a general and united assembly. Even the public balls did not draw the beau monde together, because the proprietor of the baths appeared there bedizened with insignia of knighthood, and this glitter, added to the stiff manners of this great man's family, and the tribe of lackeys in splendid liveries who constantly attended him, compelled the greater part of the company assembled silently to observe the rules prescribed to them according to their different ranks. For these reasons, the balls became gradually less numerously attended. Private parties were formed in which it was endeavored to preserve the charms that were daily diminishing in the public assemblies. One of these societies met generally twice a week in a room which at that time was usually unoccupied. There they supped, and afterwards enjoyed, either in a walk abroad or remaining in the room, the charms of unrestrained conversation. The members of this society were already acquainted, at least by name, but an Italian marquis who had lately joined their party was unknown to them, and indeed to everyone assembled at the baths. The title of Italian marquis appeared the more singular, as his name, according to the entry of it in the general list, seemed to denote him of northern extraction, and was composed of so great a number of consonants that no one could pronounce it without difficulty. His physiognomy and manners likewise presented many singularities. His long and wan visage, his black eyes, his imperious look, had so little of attraction in them that everyone would certainly have avoided him, had he not possessed a fund of entertaining stories, the relation of which proved an excellent antidote to ennui. The only drawback against them was that in general they required rather too great a share of credulity on the part of his auditors. The party had one day just risen from table, and found themselves but ill inclined for gaiety. They were still too much fatigued from the ball of the preceding evening to enjoy the recreation of walking, although invited so to do by the bright light of the moon. They were even unable to keep up any conversation. Therefore it is not to be wondered at that they were more than usually anxious for the Marquis to arrive. "Where can he be?" exclaimed the Countess in an impatient tone. "Doubtless still at the faro table, to the no small grief of the bankers," replied Florentine. "This very morning he has occasioned the sudden departure of 2 of these gentlemen." "No great loss," answered another. "To us," replied Florentine, "but it is to the proprietor of the baths, who only prohibited gambling, that it might be pursued with greater avidity." "The Marquis ought to abstain from such achievements," said the Chevalier with an air of mystery. "Gamblers are revengeful, and have generally advantageous connections. If what is whispered be correct, that the Marquis is unfortunately implicated in political affairs. But," demanded the Countess, "what then has the Marquis done to the bankers of the gaming table?" "Nothing, except that he betted on cards which almost invariably won. And what renders it rather singular, he scarcely derived any advantage from it himself, for he always adhered to the weakest party. But the other punters were not so scrupulous, for they charged their cards in such a manner that the bank broke before the deal had gone round." The Countess was on the point of asking other questions, when the Marquis, coming in, changed the conversation. "Here you are at last!" exclaimed several persons at the same moment. "We have," said the Countess, "been most anxious for your society, and just on this day you have been longer than usual absent." "I have projected an important expedition, and it has succeeded to my wishes. I hope by tomorrow there will not be a single gaming table left here. I have been from one gambling room to another, and there are not sufficient post horses to carry off the ruined bankers." Oh my gosh. "And cannot you," asked the Countess, "teach us your wonderful art of always winning?" "It would be a difficult task, my fair lady, and in order to do it, one must ensure a fortunate hand, for without that nothing could be done." "Nay," replied the Chevalier, laughing, "never did I see so fortunate an one as yours." As you are still very young, my dear Chevalier, you have many novelties to witness. Chevalier. Saying these words, the Marquis threw on the You know what? I should check that. Hang on. Chevalier. So I guess we're probably going to go with Chevalier. We'll try a couple. Chevalier. Chevalier. And I do know that Marquis is correct. I had to figure that out for Count of Monte Cristo. Oh. So, Chevalier. As you are still very young, my dear Chevalier, you have many novelties to witness. Saying these words, the Marquis threw on the Chevalier so piercing a look that the latter cried, "Will you then cast my nativity? Provided that it is not done today," said the Countess, "for who knows whether your future destiny will afford us so amusing a history as that which the Marquis 2 days since promised we should enjoy. I did not exactly say amusing, but at least full of extraordinary events, and we require some such, to draw us from the lethargy which has overwhelmed us all day." "Most willingly, but first I am anxious to learn whether any of you know aught of the surprising things related of the Death Bride." Here we go. No one remembered to have heard speak of her. The Marquis appeared anxious to add something more by way of preface, but the Countess and the rest of the party so openly manifested their impatience that the Marquis began his narration as follows. "I had for a long time projected a visit to the Count Lipa at his estates in Bohemia. We had met each other in almost every country in Europe, attracted hither by the frivolity of youth to partake of every pleasure which presented itself, but led thither when years of discretion had rendered us more sedate and steady. At length, in our more advanced age, we ardently desired, ere the close of life, once again to enjoy, by the charms of recollection, the moments of delight which we had passed together. For my part, I was anxious to see the castle of my friend, which was, according to his description, in an extremely romantic district. It was built some 100 years back by his ancestors, and their successors had preserved it with so much care that it still maintained its imposing appearance. At the same time, it afforded a comfortable abode. The Count generally passed the greater part of the year at it with his family, and only returned to the capital at the approach of winter. Being well acquainted with his movements, I did not think it needful to announce my visit, and I arrived at the castle one evening precisely at the time when I knew he would be there, and as I approached it, could not but admire the variety and beauty of the scenery which surrounded it. The hearty welcome which I received could not, however, entirely conceal from my observation the secret grief depicted on the countenances of the Count, his wife, and their daughter, the lovely Ida. In a short time, I discovered that they still mourned the loss of Ida's twin sister, who had died about a year before. Ida and Hildegard resembled each other so much that they were only to be distinguished from each other by a slight mark of a strawberry visible on Hildegard's neck. Her room and everything in it was left precisely in the same state as when she was alive, and the family were in the habit of visiting it whenever they wished to indulge the sad satisfaction of meditating on the loss of this beloved child. The two sisters had but one heart, one mind, and the parents could not but apprehend that their separation would be but of short duration. They dreaded lest Ida should also be taken from them. I did everything in my power to amuse this excellent family, by entertaining them with laughable anecdotes of my younger days, and by directing their thoughts to less melancholy subjects than that which now wholly occupied them. I had the satisfaction of discovering that my efforts were not ineffectual. Sometimes we walked in the canton round the castle, which was decked with all the beauties of summer. At other times we took a survey of the different apartments of the castle, and were astonished at their wonderful state of preservation, whilst we amused ourselves by talking over the actions of the past generation, whose portraits hung in a long gallery. Oh. One evening, the Count had been speaking to me in confidence on the subject of his future plans. Among other subjects, he expressed his anxiety that Ida, who had already, though only in her 16th year, refused several offers, should be happily married, when suddenly the gardener, quite out of breath, came to tell us he had seen the ghost, as he believed, the old chaplain belonging to the castle. Sorry. When suddenly the gardener, quite out of breath, came to tell us he had seen the ghost, as he believed, the old chaplain belonging to the castle, who had appeared a century back. Several of the servants followed the gardener, and their pallid countenances confirmed the alarming tidings he had brought. "I believe you will shortly be afraid of your own shadow," said the Count to them. He then sent them off, desiring them not again to trouble him with the like fooleries. "It is really terrible," said he to me, to see to what lengths superstition. Oh my gosh! It is really terrible," said he to me, "to see to what lengths superstition will carry persons of that rank of life, and it is impossible wholly to undeceive them. From one generation to another, an absurd report has from time to time been spread abroad of an old chaplain's ghost wandering in the environs of the castle, and that he says mass in the chapel, with other idle stories of a similar nature. This report has greatly died away since I came into possession of the castle, but it now appears to me it will never be altogether forgotten." At this moment the Duke de Marino was announced. The Count did not recollect ever having heard of him. I told him that I was tolerably well acquainted with his family, and that I had lately been present, in Venice, at the betrothing of a young man of that name. The very same young man came in while I was speaking. I should have felt very glad at seeing him, had I not perceived that my presence caused him evident uneasiness. "Ah," said he in a tolerably gay tone, after the customary forms of politeness had passed between us, "the finding you here, my dear Marquis, explains to me an occurrence which, with shame I own, caused me a sensation of fear. To my no small surprise, they knew my name in the adjacent district, and as I came up the hill which leads to the castle, I heard it pronounced 3 times in a voice wholly unknown to me, and in a still more audible tone this strange voice bade me welcome. I now, however, conclude it was yours." I assured him, and with truth, that till his name was announced the minute before, I was ignorant of his arrival, and that none of my servants knew him, for that the valet who accompanied me into Italy was not now with me. "And above all," added I, "it would be impossible to discover any equipage, however well known to one, in so dark an evening." "That is what astonishes me," exclaimed the Duke, a little amazed. The incredulous Count very politely added that the voice which had told the Duke he was welcome had at least expressed the sentiments of all the family. Such politeness! Marino, ere he said a word relative to the motive of his visit, asked a private audience of me, and confided in me by telling me that he was come with the intention of obtaining the lovely Ida's hand, and that if he was able to procure her consent, he should demand her of her father. "The Countess Apollonia, your bride-elect, is then no longer living?" asked I. "Uh-oh. We will talk on that subject hereafter," answered he. The deep sigh which accompanied these words led me to conclude that Apollonia had been guilty of infidelity or some other crime towards the Duke, and consequently I thought that I ought to abstain from any further questions, which appeared to rend his heart, already so sensibly wounded. Yet, as he begged me to become his mediator with the Count, in order to obtain from him his consent to the match, I painted in glowing colors the danger of an alliance which he had no other motive for contracting than the wish to obliterate the remembrance of a dearly and without doubt still more tenderly beloved object. But he assured me that he was far from thinking of the lovely Ida from so blamable a motive, and that he should be the happiest of men if she but proved propitious to his wishes. His expressive and penetrating tone of voice, while he said this, lulled the uneasiness that I was beginning to feel, and I promised him I would prepare the Count Lipa to listen to his entreaties and would give him the necessary information relative to the fortune and family of Marino. But I declared to him at the same time that I should by no means hurry the conclusion of the affair by my advice, as I was not in the habit of taking upon myself so great a charge as the uncertain issue of a marriage. The Duke signified his satisfaction at what I said, and made me give, what then appeared to me of no consequence, a promise that I would not make mention of the former marriage he was on the point of contracting, as it would necessarily bring on a train of unpleasant explanations. The Duke's views succeeded with a promptitude beyond his most sanguine hopes. His well-proportioned form and sparkling eyes smoothed the paths of love and introduced him to the heart of Ida. His agreeable conversation promised to the mother an amiable son-in-law, and the knowledge in rural economy which he evinced as occasions offered made the Count hope for an useful helpmate in his usual occupations, for since the first day of the Duke's arrival he had been prevented from pursuing them. Marino followed up these advantages with great ardor, and I was one evening much surprised by the intelligence of his being betrothed, as I did not dream of matters drawing so near a conclusion. They spoke at table of some bridal preparations of which I had made mention just before the Duke's arrival at the castle, and the Countess asked me whether that young Marino was a near relation of the one who was that very day betrothed to her daughter. Near enough, I answered, recollecting my promise. Marino looked at me with an air of embarrassment. But my dear Duke, continued I, tell me who mentioned the amiable Ida to you, or was it a portrait, or what else, which caused you to think of looking for a beauty, the selection of whom does so much honor to your taste, in this remote corner? For, if I am not mistaken, you said but yesterday that you had purposed traveling about for another 6 months, when all at once, I believe while in Paris, you changed your plan, and projected a journey wholly and solely to see the charming Ida. Yes, it was at Paris, replied the Duke. You are very rightly informed. I went there to see and admire the superb gallery of pictures at the museum, but I had scarcely entered it when my eyes turned from the inanimate beauties and were riveted on a lady whose incomparable features were heightened by an air of melancholy. With fear and trembling I approached her, and only ventured to follow without speaking to her. I still followed her after she quitted the gallery, and I drew her servant aside to learn the name of his mistress. He told it me. But when I expressed a wish to become acquainted with the father of this beauty, he said that was next to impossible while at Paris, as the family were on the point of quitting that city, nay, of quitting France altogether. Possibly, however, said I, some opportunity may present itself. And I looked everywhere for the lady, but she, probably imagining that her servant was following her closely, had continued to walk on, and was entirely out of sight. While I was looking around for her, the servant had likewise vanished from my view. Who was this beautiful lady? Asked Ida in a tone of astonishment. What? You really did not then perceive me in the gallery? Me? My daughter, exclaimed at the same moment Ida and her parents. Yes, you yourself, mademoiselle, the servant whom fortunately for me you left at Paris, and whom I met the same evening unexpectedly, as my guardian angel, informed me of all, so that after a short rest at home, I was able to come straight hither. What a fable, said the Count to his daughter, who was mute with astonishment. Ida, he added, turning to me, has never yet been out of her native country, and for myself I have not been in Paris these 17 years. The Duke looked at the Count and his daughter with similar marks of astonishment visible in their countenances, and conversation would have been entirely at an end if I had not taken care to introduce other topics, but I had it nearly all to myself. The repast was no sooner over than the Count took the Duke into the recess of a window, and although I was at a considerable distance and appeared wholly to fix my attention on a new chandelier, I overheard all their conversation. What motive? Demanded the Count with a serious and dissatisfied air. could have induced you to invent that singular scene in the gallery of the museum at Paris. For according to my judgment, it could in no way benefit you. Since you are anxious to conceal the cause which brought you to ask my daughter in marriage, at least you might have plainly said as much, and though possibly you might have felt repugnance at making such a declaration, there were 1,000 ways of framing your answer, without its being needful thus to offend probability. Monsieur le Comte, replied the Duke, much piqued, I held my peace at table, thinking that possibly you had reasons for wishing to keep secret your and your daughter's journey to Paris. I was silent merely from motives of discretion, but the singularity of your reproaches compels me to maintain what I have said, and, notwithstanding your reluctance to believe the truth, to declare before all the world that the capital of France was the spot where I first saw your daughter Ida. But what if I prove to you, not only by the witness of my servants, but also by that of all my tenants, that my daughter has never quitted her native place? I shall still believe the evidence of my own eyes and ears, which have as great authority over me. What you say is really enigmatical, answered the Count in a graver tone. Your serious manner convinces me you have been the dupe of some illusion, and that you have seen some other person whom you have taken for my daughter. Excuse me, therefore, for having taken up the thing so warmly. Another person! What then? I not only mistook another person for your daughter, but the very servant of whom I made mention, and who gave me so exact a description of this castle, was, according to what you say, some other person? My dear Marino, that servant was some cheat who knew this castle, and who, God only knows for what motive, spoke to you of my daughter as resembling the lady. 'Tis certainly no wish of mine to contradict you, but Ida's features are precisely the same as those which made so deep an impression on me at Paris, and which my imagination has preserved with such scrupulous fidelity. The Count shook his head, and Marino continued. What is still more, but pray pardon me for mentioning a little particularity which nothing short of necessity would have drawn from me. While in the gallery, I was standing behind the lady, and the handkerchief that covered her neck was a little disarranged, which occasioned me distinctly to perceive the mark of a small strawberry. Another strange mystery, exclaimed the Count, turning pale. It appears you are determined to make me believe wonderful stories. I have only one question to ask. Has Ida such a mark on her neck? No, monsieur, replied the Count, looking steadfastly at Marino. No, exclaimed the latter, in the utmost astonishment. No, I tell you. But Ida's twin sister, who resembled her in the most surprising manner, had the mark you mention on her neck, and a year since carried it with her into the grave. And yet 'tis only within the last few months that I saw this person in Paris. At this moment, the Countess and Ida, who had kept aside, a prey to uneasiness, not knowing what to think of the conversation, which appeared of so very important a nature, approached, but the Count, in a commanding tone, ordered them to retire immediately. He then led the Duke entirely away into a retired corner of the window, and continued the conversation in so low a voice that I could hear nothing further. Sorry. Oh. My astonishment was extreme when, that very same evening, the Count gave orders to have Hildegard's tomb opened in his presence, but he beforehand related briefly what I have just told you, and proposed my assisting the Duke and him in opening the grave. The Duke excused himself by saying that the very idea made him tremble with horror, for he could not overcome, especially at night, his fear of a corpse. The Count begged he would not mention the gallery scene to anyone, and above all to spare the extreme sensibility of the affianced bride from a recital of the conversation they had just had, even if she should request to be informed of it. In the meantime, the sexton arrived with his lantern. The Count and I followed him. It is morally impossible, said the Count to me, as we walked together, that any trick can have been played respecting my daughter's death. The circumstances attendant thereon are but too well known to me. You may readily believe also that the affection we bore our poor girl would prevent our running any risk of burying her too soon. But suppose even the possibility of that, and that the tomb had been opened by some avaricious persons. who found, on opening the coffin, that the body became reanimated. No one can believe for a moment that my daughter would not have instantly returned to her parents, who doted on her rather than have fled to a distant country. This last circumstance puts the matter beyond doubt, for even should it be admitted as a truth that she was carried by force to some distant part of the world, she would have found 1,000 ways of returning. My eyes are, however, about to be convinced that the sacred remains of my Hildegard really repose in the grave. To convince myself, cried he again, in a tone of voice so melancholy, yet loud, that the sexton turned his head. This movement rendered the Count more circumspect, and he continued in a lower tone of voice. How should I for a moment believe it possible that the slightest trace of my daughter's features should be still in existence, or that the destructive hand of time should have spared her beauty? Let us return, Marquis, for who could tell, even were I to see the skeleton, that I should know it from that of an entire stranger, whom they may have placed in the tomb to fill her place. He was even about to give orders not to open the door of the chapel, at which we were just arrived, when I represented to him that were I in his place, I should have found it extremely difficult to determine on such a measure, but that having gone thus far, it was requisite to complete the task, by examining whether some of the jewels buried with Hildegard's corpse were not wanting. I added that, judging by a number of well-known facts, all bodies were not destroyed equally soon. Ugh. My representations had the desired effect. The Count squeezed my hand, and we followed the sexton, who, by his pallid countenance and trembling limbs, evidently shewed that he was unaccustomed to nocturnal employments of this nature. I know not whether any of this present company were ever in a chapel at midnight, before the iron doors of a vault, about to examine the succession of leaden coffins enclosing the remains of an illustrious family. Certain it is that at such a moment the noise of bolts and bars produces such a remarkable sensation that one is led to dread the sound of the door grating on its hinges. And when the vault is opened, one cannot help hesitating for an instant to enter it. The Count was evidently seized with these sensations of terror, which I discovered by a stifled sigh, but he concealed his feelings, notwithstanding I remarked that he dared not trust himself to look on any other coffin than the one containing his daughter's remains. He opened it himself. "Did I not say so?" cried he, seeing that the features of the corpse bore a perfect resemblance to those of Ida. I was obliged to prevent the Count, who was seized with astonishment, from kissing the forehead of the inanimate body. "Do not," I added, "disturb the peace of those who repose in death." And I used my utmost efforts to withdraw the Count immediately from this dismal abode. On our return to the castle, we found those persons whom we had left there in an anxious state of suspense. The two ladies had closely questioned the Duke on what had passed, and would not admit as a valid excuse the promise he had made of secrecy. They entreated us also, but in vain, to satisfy their curiosity. They succeeded better the following day with the sexton, whom they sent for privately, and who told them all he knew. But it only tended to excite their anxious wish to learn the subject of the conversation which had occasioned this nocturnal visit to the sepulchral vault. As for myself, I dreamt the whole of the following night of the apparition Marino had seen at Paris. I conjectured many things which I did not think fit to communicate to the Count, because he absolutely questioned the connection of a superior world with ours. At this juncture of affairs, I with pleasure saw that this singular circumstance, if not entirely forgotten, was at least but rarely and slightly mentioned. But I now began to find another cause for anxious solicitude. The Duke constantly persisted in refusing to explain himself on the subject of his previous engagement, even when we were alone, in the embarrassment he could not conceal, whenever I made mention of the good qualities that I believed his intended to have possessed, as well as several other little singularities, led me to conclude that Marino's attachment for Apollonia had been first shaken at the picture gallery, at sight of the lovely incognita, and that Apollonia had been forsaken, owing to his yielding to temptations, and that doubtless she could never have been guilty of breaking off an alliance so solemnly contracted. Uh-oh. Foreseeing from this that the charming Ida could never hope to find much happiness in a union with Marino, and knowing that the wedding day was nigh at hand, I resolved to unmask the perfidious deceiver as quickly as possible, and to make him repent his infidelity. An excellent occasion presented itself one day for me to accomplish my designs. Having finished supper, we were still sitting at table, and someone said that iniquity is frequently punished in this world, upon which I observed that I myself had witnessed striking proofs of the truth of this remark, when Ida and her mother entreated me to name one of these examples. Under these circumstances, ladies, answered I, permit me to relate a history to you, which, according to my opinion, will particularly interest you. Us! They both exclaimed. At the same time, I fixed my eyes on the Duke, who for several days past had evidently distrusted me, and I saw that his conscience had rendered him pale. That at least is my opinion, replied I, but my dear Count, will you pardon me, if the supernatural is sometimes interwoven with my narrative? Very willingly, answered he, smiling, and I will content myself with expressing my surprise at so many things of this sort having happened to you, as I have never experienced any of them myself. I plainly perceived that the Duke made signs of approval at what he said, but I took no notice of it, and answered the Count by saying that all the world have not probably the use of their eyes. That may be, replied he, still smiling. But, said I to him in a low and expressive voice, think you an uncorrupted body in the vault is a common phenomenon? He appeared staggered, and I thus continued in an undertone of voice. For that matter, 'tis very possible to account for it naturally, and therefore it would be useless to contest the subject with you. We are wandering from the point, said the Countess a little angrily, and she made me a sign to begin, which I accordingly did, in the following words. The scene of my anecdote lies in Venice. I possibly then may know something of it, cried the Duke, who entertained some suspicions. Possibly so, replied I, but there were reasons for keeping the event secret. It happened somewhere about 18 months since, at the period you first set out on your travels. The son of an extremely wealthy nobleman, whom I shall designate by the name of Filippo, being attracted to Leghorn by the affairs consequent on his succession to an inheritance, had won the heart of an amiable and lovely girl called Clara. He promised her, as well as her parents, that ere his return to Venice he would come back and marry her. The moment for his departure was preceded by certain ceremonies, which in their termination were terrible, for after the two lovers had exhausted every protestation of reciprocal affection, Filippo invoked the aid of the spirit of vengeance in case of infidelity. They prayed even that whichever of the lovers should prove faithful might not be permitted to repose quietly in the grave, but should haunt the perjured one, and force the inconstant party to come amongst the dead, and to share in the grave those sentiments which on earth had been forgotten. The parents, who were seated by them at table, remembered their youthful days, and permitted the overheated and romantic imagination of the young people to take its free course. The lovers finished by making punctures in their arms, and letting their blood run into a glass filled with white champagne. Our souls shall be inseparable as our blood, exclaimed Filippo, and drinking half the contents of the glass, he gave the rest to Clara. All righty then. At this moment the Duke experienced a violent degree of agitation, and from time to time darted such menacing looks at me that I was led to conclude that in his adventure some scene of a similar nature had taken place. I can, however, affirm that I related the details respecting Filippo's departure, as they were represented in a letter written by the mother of Clara, who, continued I, after so many demonstrations of such a violent passion, could have expected the denouement. Filippo's return to Venice happened precisely at the period at which a young beauty, hitherto educated in a distant convent, made her first appearance in the great world. She on a sudden exhibited herself as an angel whom a cloud had till then concealed, and excited universal admiration. Filippo's parents had heard frequent mention of Clara, and of the projected alliance between her and their son. but they thought that this alliance was like many others, contracted one day without the parties knowing why, and broken off the next with equal want of thought. And influenced by this idea, they presented their son to the parents of Camilla, which was the name of the young beauty, whose family were of the highest rank. They represented to Filippo the great advantages he would obtain by an alliance with her. The carnival happening just at this period completed the business by affording him so many favorable opportunities of being with Camilla, and in the end, the remembrance of Leghorn held but very little place in his mind. His letters became colder and colder each succeeding day, and on Clara expressing how sensibly she felt the change, he ceased writing to her altogether, and did everything in his power to hasten his union with Camilla, who was, without compare, much the handsomer and more wealthy. The agonies poor Clara endured were manifest in her illegible writing, and by the tears which were but too evidently shed over her letters, but neither the one nor the other had any more influence over the fickle heart of Filippo than the prayers of the unfortunate girl. Even the menace of coming, according to their solemn agreement, from the tomb to haunt him, and carry him with her to that grave which threatened so soon to enclose her, had but little effect on his mind, which was entirely engrossed by the idea of the happiness he should enjoy in the arms of Camilla. The father of the latter, who was my intimate friend, invited me beforehand to the wedding, and although numerous affairs detained him that summer in the city, so that he could not as usual enjoy the pleasures of the country, yet we sometimes went to his pretty villa, situated on the banks of the Brenta, where his daughter's marriage was to be celebrated with all possible splendor. A particular circumstance, however, occasioned the ceremony to be deferred for some weeks. The parents of Camilla, having been very happy in their own union, were anxious that the same priest who married them should pronounce the nuptial benediction on their daughter. Oh. This priest, who, notwithstanding his great age, had the appearance of vigorous health, was seized with a slow fever which confined him to his bed. However, in time it abated, he became gradually better and better, and the wedding day was at length fixed. But, as if some secret power was at work to prevent this union, the worthy priest was, on the very day destined for the celebration of their marriage, seized with a feverish shivering of so alarming a nature that he dared not stir out of the house, and he strongly advised the young couple to select another priest to marry them. The parents still persisted in their design of the nuptial benediction being given to their children by the respectable old man who had married them. They would have certainly spared themselves a great deal of grief if they had never swerved from their determination. Very grand preparations had been made in honor of the day, and as they could no longer be deferred, it was decided that they should consider it as a ceremony of solemn affiance. At noon, the bargemen, attired in their splendid garb, awaited the company's arrival on the banks of the canal. Their joyous song was soon distinguished, while conducting to the villa, now decorated with flowers, the numerous gondolas containing parties of the best company. During the dinner, which lasted till evening, the betrothed couple exchanged rings. At the very moment of their so doing, a piercing shriek was heard, which struck terror into the breasts of all the company, and absolutely struck Filippo with horror. Everyone ran to the windows, for although it was becoming dark, each object was visible, but no one was to be seen. "Stop an instant," said the Duke to me with a fierce smile. His countenance, which had frequently changed color during the recital, evinced strong marks of the torments of a wicked conscience. I am also acquainted with that story, of a voice being heard in the air. It is borrowed from the memoirs of Mademoiselle Clairon. A deceased lover tormented her in this completely original manner. The shriek in her case was followed by a clapping of hands. I hope, Monsieur le Marquis, that you will not omit that particular in your story. And why, replied I, should you imagine that nothing of a similar nature could occur to anyone besides that actress? Your incredulity appears to me so much the more extraordinary, as it seems to rest on facts which may lay claim to belief. The Countess made me a sign to continue, and I pursued my narrative as follows. A short time after they had heard this inexplicable shriek, I begged Camilla, facing whom I was sitting, to permit me to look at her ring once more, the exquisite workmanship of which had already been much admired. But it was not on her finger. A general search was made, but not the slightest trace of the ring could be discovered. The company even rose from their seats to look for it, but all in vain. Meanwhile, the time for the evening's amusements approached. Fireworks were exhibited on the Brenta preceding the ball. The company were masked and got into the gondolas, but nothing was so striking as the silence which reigned during this fete. No one seemed inclined to open their mouth, and scarcely was heard a faint exclamation of bravo at sight of the fireworks. The ball was one of the most brilliant I ever witnessed. The precious stones and jewels with which the ladies of the party were covered reflected the lights in the chandeliers with redoubled luster. The most splendidly attired of the whole was Camilla. Her father, who was fond of pomp, rejoiced in the idea that no one in the assembly was equal to his daughter in splendor or beauty. Possibly to satisfy himself of this fact, he made a tour of the room and returned loudly expressing his surprise at having perceived on another lady precisely the same jewels which adorned Camilla. He was even weak enough to express a slight degree of chagrin. However, he consoled himself with the idea that a bouquet of diamonds which was destined for Camilla to wear at supper would alone in value be greater than all she then had on. But as they were on the point of sitting down to table, and the anxious father again threw a look around him, he discovered that the same lady had also a bouquet which appeared to the full as valuable as Camilla's. My friend's curiosity could no longer be restrained. He approached and asked whether it would be too great a liberty to learn the name of the fair mask. But to his great surprise, the lady shook her head and turned away from him. At the same instant, the steward came in to ask whether since dinner there had been any addition to the party, as the covers were not sufficient. His master answered with rather a dissatisfied air that there were only the same number, and accused his servants of negligence, but the steward still persisted in what he had said. An additional cover was placed. The master counted them himself and discovered that there really was one more in number than he had invited. As he had recently, on account of some inconsiderate expressions, had a dispute with government, he was apprehensive that some spy had contrived to slip in with the company, but as he had no reason to believe that on such a day as that anything of a suspicious nature would be uttered, he resolved, in order to be satisfied respecting so indiscreet a procedure as the introduction of such a person in a family fete, to beg everyone present to unmask. But in order to avoid the inconvenience likely to arise from such a request, he determined not to propose it till the very last thing. Everyone present expressed their surprise at the luxuries and delicacies of the table, for it far surpassed everything of the sort seen in that country, especially with respect to the wines. Still, however, the father of Camilla was not satisfied, and loudly lamented that an accident had happened to his capital red champagne, which prevented his being able to offer his guests a single glass of it. The company seemed anxious to become gay. For the whole of the day, nothing like gaiety had been visible among them, but no one around where I sat partook of this inclination, for curiosity alone appeared to occupy their whole attention. I was sitting near the lady who was so splendidly attired, and I remarked that she neither ate nor drank anything, that she neither addressed nor answered a word to her neighbors, and that she appeared to have her eyes constantly fixed on the affianced couple. The rumor of this singularity gradually spread round the room, and again disturbed the mirth which had become pretty general. Each whispered to the other 1,000 conjectures on this mysterious personage, but the general opinion was that some unhappy passion for Filippo was the cause of this extraordinary conduct. Those sitting next the unknown were the first to rise from table, in order to find more cheerful associates, and their places were filled by others, who hoped to discover some acquaintance in this silent lady, and obtain from her a more welcome reception, but their hopes were equally futile. At the time the champagne was handed round, Filippo also brought a chair and sat by the unknown. She then became somewhat more animated, and turned towards Filippo, which was more than she had done to anyone else, and she offered him her glass, as if wishing him to drink out of it. A violent trembling seized Filippo when she looked at him steadfastly. "The wine is red," cried he, holding up the glass. "I thought there had been no red champagne." "Red," said the father of Camilla with an air of extreme surprise, approaching him from curiosity. "Look at the lady's glass," replied Filippo. "The wine in it is as white as all the rest," answered Camilla's father, and he called all present to witness it. They, everyone, unanimously declared that the wine was white. Filippo drank it not, but quitted his seat, for a second look from his neighbor had caused him extreme agitation. He took the father of Camilla aside and whispered something to him. The latter returned to the company, saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, I entreat you, for reasons which I will tell you presently, instantly to unmask." As in this request he but expressed in a degree the general wish, everyone's mask was off as quick as thought, and each face uncovered, excepting that of the silent lady, on whom every look was fixed, and whose face they were the most anxious to see. "You alone keep on your mask," said Camilla's father to her, after a short silence. "May I hope you will also remove yours?" She obstinately persisted in her determination of remaining unknown. This strange conduct affected the father of Camilla the more sensibly, as he recognized in the others all those whom he had invited to the fete, and found beyond doubt that the mute lady was the one exceeding the number invited. He was, however, unwilling to force her to unmask, because the uncommon splendor of her dress did not permit him any longer to harbor the idea that this additional guest was a spy, and thinking her also a person of distinction, he did not wish to be deficient in good manners. He thought possibly she might be some friend of the family, who, not residing at Venice, but finding on her arrival in that city that he was to give this fete, had conceived this innocent frolic. It was thought right, however, at all events, to obtain all the information that could be gained from the servants, but none of them knew anything of this lady. There were no servants of hers there, and those belonging to Camilla's father did not recollect having seen any who appeared to appertain to her. What rendered this circumstance doubly strange was that, as I before mentioned, this lady only put this magnificent bouquet into her bosom the instant previous to her sitting down to supper. The whispering, which had generally usurped the place of all conversation, gained each moment more and more ascendancy, when on a sudden the masked lady arose, and walking towards the door, beckoned Filippo to follow her. But Camilla hindered him from obeying her signal, for she had a long time observed with what fixed attention the mysterious lady looked at her intended husband. And she had also remarked that the latter had quitted the stranger in violent agitation, and from all this she apprehended that love had caused him to be guilty of some folly or other. The master of the house, turning a deaf ear to all his daughter's remonstrances, and a prey to the most terrible fears, followed the unknown, at a distance, it is true, but she was no sooner out of the room than he returned. At this moment, the shriek which they had heard at noon was repeated, but seemed louder from the silence of night, and communicated anew a fright to all present. By the time the father of Camilla had returned from the first movement which his fear had occasioned him to make, the unknown was nowhere to be found. The servants in waiting outside the house had no knowledge whatever of the masked lady. In every direction around there were crowds of persons. The river was lined with gondolas, and yet not an individual among them had seen the mysterious female. All these circumstances had occasioned so much uneasiness to the whole party that everyone was anxious to return home, and the master of the house was obliged to permit the departure of the gondolas much earlier than he had intended. The return home was, as might naturally be expected, very melancholy. On the following day, the betrothed couple were, however, pretty composed. Filippo had even adopted Camilla's idea of the unknown being someone whom love had deprived of reason, and as for the horrible shriek twice repeated, they were willing to attribute it to some people who were diverting themselves, and they decided that inattention on the part of the servants was the sole cause of the unknown absenting herself without being perceived. And they even at last persuaded themselves that the sudden disappearance of the ring, which they had not been able to find, was owing to the malice of some one of the servants who had pilfered it. In a word, they banished everything that could tend to weaken these explanations, and only one thing remained to harass them. The old priest, who was to bestow on them the nuptial benediction, had yielded up his last breath, and the friendship which had so intimately subsisted between him and the parents of Camilla did not permit them in decency to think of marriage and amusements the week following his death. The day this venerable priest was buried, Filippo's gaiety received a severe shock, for he learned in a letter from Clara's mother the death of that lovely girl. Sinking under the grief occasioned her by the infidelity of the man she had never ceased to love, she died, but to her latest hour she declared she should never rest quietly in her grave until the perjured man had fulfilled the promise he had made to her. Uh-oh. This circumstance produced a stronger effect on him than all the imprecations of the unhappy mother, for he recollected that the first shriek, the cause of which they had never been able to ascertain, was heard at the precise moment of Clara's death, which convinced him that the unknown mask could only have been the spirit of Clara. This idea deprived him at intervals of his senses. He constantly carried this letter about him, and with an air of wandering would sometimes draw it from his pocket in order to reconsider it attentively. Even Camilla's presence did not deter him. As it was natural to conclude this letter contained the cause of the extraordinary change which had taken place in Filippo, she one day gladly seized the opportunity of reading it, when in one of his absent fits he let it fall from his hands. Filippo, struck by the death-like paleness and faintness which overcame Camilla as she returned him the letter, knew instantly that she had read it. In the deepest affliction, he threw himself at her feet and conjured her to tell him how he must act. Yo, we reading freaky stuff again? Yes, we are. It hasn't been quite as freaky as the last two. So currently, we have a lover who was left for another. Wait, hang on. So first, there were baths involved, and then an Italian who tells stories, and now he's telling another story about a friend of his whose twin daughters, one of them died, and then a guy came to betroth himself with the living daughter because he had seen a vision of the dead daughter, but apparently he was betrothed to somebody else and probably left her for this chick, and so now the Italian is telling this story to kind of make him squirm a little bit. And so this story is same thing. The lovers were betrothed themselves to each other, drank champagne with each other's blood in it. I guess that part was a little bit weird. And then the dude ran off with another chick, and now there was a ghost of the chick, and she apparently died. Are the bats Italian too? I bet so. I bet so. Yeah. So Filippo is the story within a story character, and he left Clara for Camilla, and Clara died, and there was a shriek, and yeah. You feel like you got a contact listening to that synopsis. Honestly, yeah, I kind of felt that while I was reciting it, because I kind of forgot about all the things that went into this so far. So, yeah. So now Filippo got the letter about Clara having died. So now the mysterious lady who was at their almost wedding was apparently, the ghost of Clara. And so he's been rereading this letter from the mother telling him that she had died. And now Camilla just read it. So that's where we're at. You're up to speed, I think. So we'll see. Love me with greater constancy than you did her, replied Camilla mournfully. Ooh, With transport, he promised to do so, because that worked so well the last time. But his agitation became greater and greater, and increased to a most extraordinary pitch the morning of the day fixed for the wedding. As he was going to the house of Camilla's father, before it became dark, from whence he was to take his bride at dawn of day to the church, according to the custom of the country, he fancied he saw Clara's spirit walking constantly at his side. You don't know if you're up to speed, but you feel like you just took some speed. Yeah, that's fair. Honestly, like it was. I did. I kind of forgot about the whole drinking blood situation. So yeah. So there always is something sort of like really twisted. Just a very subtle but potent twist in these things. Yeah, and it's called The Death's Bride, by the way. So if that helps. Never was seen a couple about to receive the nuptial benediction with so mournful an aspect. I accompanied the parents of Camilla, who had requested me to be a witness, and oops, sorry. And the sequel has, gosh darn it, and the sequel has made an indelible impression on my mind of the events of that dismal morning. We were proceeding silently to the church of the Salutation, when Filippo, in our way thither, frequently requested me to remove the stranger from Camilla's side, for she had evil designs against her. What stranger? I asked him. In God's name, don't speak so loud, replied he, for you cannot but see how anxious she is to force herself between Camilla and me. Mere chimera, my friend. There are none but yourself and Camilla. Would to heaven my eyes did not deceive me. Take care that she does not enter the church, added he, as we arrived at the door. She will not enter it, rest assured, said I, and to the great astonishment of Camilla's parents, I made a motion as if to drive someone away. Honestly, after spending all day working on that video, among other things, your brain is fried and was about as prepared for that information as France was prepared for German invasion. Well, that fits very well because, again, this book was German and then translated into French, so the French also invaded the German here. So it's fitting, very fitting. Unless that's what you meant. I hope it went well, though. Did you finish? Ugh. It's almost like a little spooky coincidental. Yeah, it's all done. It'll be live in 20 minutes. Excellent. Sounds good. I'm very excited. Yay. I'll watch it tomorrow, though, because it's going to be late. Awesome. All right. All right. We found Filippo's father already in the church, and as soon as his son perceived him, he took leave of him as if he was going to die. Camilla sobbed, and Filippo exclaimed, "There's the stranger. She has then got in." The parents of Camilla doubted whether, under such circumstances, the marriage ceremony ought to be begun. But Camilla, entirely devoted to her love, cried, "These chimeras of fancy render my care and attention the more necessary." They approached the altar. At that moment, a sudden gust of wind blew out the wax tapers. The priest appeared displeased at their not having shut the windows more securely. But Filippo exclaimed, "The windows? See you not, then, that there is one here who blew out the wax tapers purposely?" Everyone looked astonished, and Filippo cried as he hastily disengaged his hand from that of Camilla, "Don't you see also that she is tearing me away from my intended bride?" Camilla fell fainting into the arms of her parents, and the priest declared that under such peculiar circumstances it was impossible to proceed with the ceremony. It's an analysis video, so it won't be as exciting as the last couple videos. Okay, unless you speak military aviation hyper nerd, it'll probably sound like the adults from Charlie Brown. Well, I like me a good Charlie Brown movie, so I'll maybe use a little bit of liquid help for for that watch. It'll be good. It'll be fun. I'm excited. I'll probably learn something. I'll be able to pick out one thing or another. I'm still excited. The parents of both attributed Filippo's state to mental derangement. They even supposed he had been poisoned. For an instant after, the unfortunate man expired in most violent convulsions. The surgeons who opened his body could not, however, discover any grounds for this suspicion. The parents, who as well as myself were informed by Camilla of the subject of these supposed horrors of Filippo, did everything in their power to conceal this adventure. Yet, on talking over all the circumstances, they could never satisfactorily explain the apparition of the mysterious mask at the time of the wedding fete. And what still appeared very surprising was that the ring lost at the country villa was found amongst Camilla's other jewels at the time of their return from church. Just setting realistic expectations, okay? Also, free review on how center of lift versus center of gravity works contained within. Excellent. I'm looking forward to it. Because, I mean, it's one of those things where you can never have enough understanding of it. At least from my perspective, where I'm still working on understanding the things. So I'm looking forward to that as well. It's going to be good. I am excited. Your realistic expectations are still excitement. This is indeed a wonderful history, said the Count. So we're back. We're outside of the story now. We're back with the Italian. Well, so we're out of the story. A story within a story. It's like 16 stories. So we're outside of the story that the Italian was okay. So they were having a gathering in the baths. And then the Italian was telling a story in which he was then telling a story. So now we're in the first layer of story. Yeah. So this is indeed a wonderful history, said the Count. His wife uttered a deep sigh, and Ida exclaimed, "It has really made me shudder." "That is precisely what every betrothed person ought to feel who listens to such recitals," answered I, looking steadfastly at the Duke, who, while I was talking, had risen and sat down again several times, and who, from his troubled look, plainly shewed that he feared I should counteract his wishes. Having a gathering in the bath. What? Yes, exactly. They did that back then. Yeah, no, that was definitely a thing. They're just like, yeah, we're gathering in the baths. At least that's what they said in the beginning. And, okay, and I can't even say that without it being bad. Ballrooms. They would have events within the ballrooms. Yeah. So there's baths and ballrooms. Sounds like a very terrible band. Okay. Troubled look plains you that he feared I should counteract his wishes. "A word with you," he whispered me as we were retiring to rest, and he accompanied me to my room. "I plainly perceive your generous intentions, this history invented for the occasion." "Hold," said I to him in an irritated tone of voice. "I was eyewitness to what you have just heard." "Like a ballroom blitz. Sure. You don't know, Japanese still have a lot of public baths, but you're never getting into that." Right, exactly. It was a thing at one point, and in some places still. But, yeah, I don't know, just seems so unhygienic and strange. How then can you doubt its authenticity without accusing a man of honor of uttering a falsehood? "We will talk on this subject presently," replied he in a tone of raillery, "but tell me truly from whence you learnt the anecdote relative to mixing the blood with wine. I know the person from whose life you borrowed this idea." "I do assure you that I have taken it from no one's life but Filippo's, and yet there may be similar stories. As of the shriek, for instance. But even this singular manner of irrevocably affiancing themselves may have presented itself to any two lovers." "Perhaps so, yet one could trace in your narration many traits resembling another history." "That is very possible. All love stories are founded on the same stock, and cannot deny their parentage." You didn't even think of the hygiene. You just don't want to be in a room full of naked people. I mean, that's also fair. And I guess what does that say about me that that's the first thing that I go to is the hygiene? We're going to leave that one lie. All right, moving on. Yeah, just on par. They're both on par. Yeah, just no. It's just no. Big ol' no. X. Good. Yeah. Anyway, love stories. No matter, replied Marino. But I desire that from henceforth you do not permit yourself to make any allusion to my past life, and still less that you relate certain anecdotes to the Count. On these conditions, and only on these conditions, do I pardon your former very ingenious fiction. Conditions? Forgiveness? And do you dare thus to talk to me? This is rather too much. Now take my answer. Tomorrow morning the Count shall know that you have been already affianced, and what you now exact. Marquis, if you dare. Oh, yes, I dare do it, and I owe it to an old friend. The impostor who dares accuse me of falsehood shall no longer wear his deceitful mask in this house. Passion had, spite of my endeavors, carried me so far that a duel became inevitable. The Duke challenged me, and we agreed, at parting, to meet the following morning in a neighboring wood with pistols. There's always a new twist. In effect, before daylight, we each took our servant and went into the forest. Marino, remarking that I had not given any orders in case of my being killed, undertook to do so for me, and accordingly he told my servant what to do with my body, as if everything was already decided. He again addressed me ere we shook hands. 1v1 me, bro. Right, I'll wreck you. I swear on me, mum. I bet that's actually how it went down. It sounds so proper in the books nowadays, but no, that's got to be how it went down. For, said he, the combat between us must be very unequal. I am young, added he, but in many instances my hand has proved a steady one. I have not, it is true, absolutely killed any man, but I have invariably hit my adversary precisely on the part I intended. In this instance, however, I must, for the first time, kill my man, as it is the only effectual method of preventing your annoying me further, unless you will give me your word of honor not to discover any occurrences of my past life to the Count, in which case I consent to consider the affair as terminated here. As you may naturally believe, I rejected his proposition. As it must be so, replied he, recommend your soul to God. We prepared accordingly. It is your first fire, he said to me. I yield it to you, answered I. He refused to fire first. I then drew the trigger and caused the pistol to drop from his hand. He appeared surprised, but his astonishment was great indeed when, after taking up another pistol, he found he had missed me. He pretended to have aimed at my heart, and had not even the possibility of an excuse, for he could not but acknowledge that no sensation of fear on my part had induced me to move and balk his aim. At his request, I fired a second time, and again aimed at his pistol, which he held in his left hand, and to his great astonishment, it dropped also, but the ball had passed so near his hand that it was a good deal bruised. His second fire having passed me, I told him I would not fire again, but that, as it was possible, the extreme agitation of his mind had occasioned him to miss me twice, I proposed adjusting matters. Before he had time to refuse my offer, the Count, who had suspicions that all was not right, was between us with his daughter. He complained loudly of such conduct on the part of his guests, and demanded some explanation on the cause of our dispute. I then developed the whole business in presence of Marino, whose evident embarrassment convinced the Count and Ida of the truth of the reproaches his conscience made him. But the Duke soon availed himself of Ida's affection and created an entire change in the Count's mind, who that very evening said to me, "You are right. I certainly ought to take some decided step and send the Duke from my house. But what could win the Apollonia whom he has abandoned and whom he will never see again? Added to which, he is the only man for whom my daughter has ever felt a sincere attachment. Let us leave the young people to follow their own inclinations. The Countess perfectly coincides in this opinion, and adds that it would hurt her much were this handsome Venetian to be driven from our house. How many little infidelities and indiscretions are committed in the world and excused, owing to particular circumstances. But it appears to me that in the case in point, these particular circumstances are wanting, answered I. However, finding the Count persisted in his opinion, I said no more. The marriage took place without any interruption, but still there was very little of gaiety at the feast, which usually on these occasions is of so splendid and jocund a nature. The ball in the evening was dull, and Marino alone danced with most extraordinary glee. Fortunately, Monsieur le Marquis, said he in my ear, quitting the dance for an instant and laughing aloud, there are no ghosts or spirits here, as at your Venetian wedding. Don't, I answered, putting up my finger to him. Don't, I answered, putting up my finger to him. Rejoice too soon. Misery is slow in its operations, and often is not perceived by us blind mortals till it treads on our heels. Contrary to my intention, this conversation rendered him quite silent, and what convinced me the more strongly of the effect it had made on him was the redoubled vehemence with which the Duke again began dancing. The Countess in vain entreated him to be careful of his health, and all Ida's supplications were able to obtain was a few minutes' rest to take breath when he could no longer go on. A few minutes after, I saw Ida in tears, which did not appear as if occasioned by joy, and she quitted the ballroom. I was standing as close to the door as I am to you at this moment, so that I could not for an instant doubt its being really Ida. But what appeared to me very strange was that in a few seconds I saw her come in again, with a countenance as calm as possible. I followed her, and remarked that she asked the Duke to dance, and was so far from moderating his violence that she partook of and even increased it by her own example. I also remarked that as soon as the dance was over, the Duke took leave of the parents of Ida, and with her vanished through a small door leading to the nuptial apartment. Uh-oh. Oh no. While I was endeavoring to account in my own mind how it was possible for Ida so suddenly to change her sentiments, a conference in an undertone took place at the door of the room between the Count and his valet. The subject was evidently a very important one, as the greatly incensed looks of the Count towards his gardener evinced, while he confirmed, as it appeared, what the valet had before said. I drew near the trio and heard that at a particular time the church organ was heard to play, and that the whole edifice had been illuminated within until 12 o'clock, which had just struck. The Count was very angry at their troubling him with so silly a tale, and asked why they did not sooner inform him of it. They answered that everyone was anxious to see how it would end. The gardener added that the old chaplain had been seen again. Oh, he's also a ghost. And the peasantry who lived near the forest even pretended that they had seen the summit of the mountain which overhung their valley illuminated, and spirits dance around it. Very well, exclaimed the Count with a gloomy air. So all the old idle trash is resumed. The death bride is also, I hope, going to play her part. Ugh. The valet having pushed aside the gardener, that he might not still further enrage the Count, I put in my word, and said to the Count, you might at least listen to what they have to say, and learn what it is they pretend to have seen. What is said about the death bride? Said I to the gardener. He shrugged up his shoulders. Was I not right? Cried the Count. Here we are, then, and must listen to this ridiculous tale. All these things are treasured in the memory of these people, and constantly afford subjects and phantoms to their imaginations. Is it permitted to ask under what form? Pray, pardon me, replied the gardener, but it resembled the deceased Mademoiselle Hildegard. She passed close to me in the garden, and then came into the castle. So the deceased Mademoiselle Hildegard was, the bride's twin sister. Yeah. In the nuptial chambers. Oh, said the Count to him, I beg, in future, you will be a little more circumspect in your fancies, and leave my daughter to rest quietly in the tomb. 'Tis well. He then made a signal to his servants, who went out. Well, my dear Marquis, said he to me. Well, your belief in stories will not, surely, carry you so far as to give credence to my Hildegard's spirit appearing. At least it may have appeared to the gardener only. Do you recollect the adventure in the museum at Paris? You are right. That again was a pretty invention, which to this moment I cannot fathom. Believe me, I should sooner have refused my daughter to the Duke for his having been the fabricator of so gross a story than for his having forsaken his first love. I see very plainly that we shall not easily accord on this point, for if my ready belief appears strange to you, your doubts seem to me incomprehensible. The company assembled at the castle retired by degrees, and I alone was left with the Count and his lady, when Ida came to the room door, clothed in her ball dress, and appeared astonished at finding the company had left. "What can this mean?" demanded the Countess. Her husband could not find words to express his astonishment. "Where is Marino?" exclaimed Ida. "Do you ask us where he is?" replied her mother. "Did we not see you go out with him through that small door?" "That could not be. You mistake." "No, no, my dear child. A very short time since you were dancing with singular vehemence, and then you both went out together." "Me, my mother!" "Yes, my dear Ida. How is it possible you should have forgotten all this?" "I have forgotten nothing, believe me." "Where then have you been all this time?" "In my sister's chamber," said Ida. I remarked that at these words the Count became somewhat pale, and his fearful eye caught mine. He, however, said nothing. The Countess, fearing that her daughter was deceiving her, said to her in an afflicted tone of voice, "How could so singular a fancy possess you on a day like this?" I cannot account for it, and only know that all on a sudden I felt an oppression at my heart, and fancied that all I wanted was Hildegard. At the same time, I felt a firm belief that I should find her in her room, playing on her guitar, for which reason I crept thither softly. "And did you find her there?" "Alas, no, but the eager desire that I felt to see her, added to the fatigue of dancing, so entirely overpowered me that I seated myself on a chair, where I fell fast asleep." How long since did you quit the room?" "The clock in the tower struck the 3/4 past 11, just as I entered my sister's room." "What does all this mean?" said the Countess to her husband, in a low voice. "She talks in a connected manner, and yet I know that as the clock struck 3/4 past 11, I entreated Ida on this very spot to dance more moderately." "And Marino?" asked the Count. "I thought, as I before said, that I should find him here." "Good God!" exclaimed the mother. "She raves. But the Duke, where is he then?" "What then, my good mother?" said Ida, with an air of great disquiet, while leaning on the Countess. Meanwhile, the Count took a wax taper and made a sign for me to follow him. A horrible spectacle awaited us in the bridal chamber, whither he conducted me. We there found the Duke. Oh no, come on! We there found the Duke, extended on the floor. There did not appear the slightest signs of life in him, and his features were distorted in the most frightful manner. Imagine the extreme affliction Ida endured when she heard this recital, and found that all the resources of the medical attendants were employed in vain. The Count and his family could not be roused from the deep consternation which threatened to overwhelm them. A short time after this event, some business of importance occasioned me to quit their castle, and certainly I was not sorry for the excuse to get away. But ere I left that county, I did not fail to collect in the village every possible information relative to the death bride, whose history, unfortunately, in passing from one mouth to another, experienced many alterations. It appeared to me, however, upon the whole, that this affianced bride lived in this district about the 14th or 15th century. She was a young lady of noble family, and she had conducted herself with so much perfidy and ingratitude towards her lover that he died of grief. But afterwards, when she was about to marry, he appeared to her the night of her intended wedding, and she died in consequence. And it is said that since that time, the spirit of this unfortunate creature wanders on earth in every possible shape, particularly in that of lovely females, to render their lovers inconstant. As it was not permitted for her to appear in the form of any living being, she always chose amongst the dead those who the most strongly resembled them. It was for this reason she voluntarily frequented the galleries in which were hung family portraits. It is even reported that she has been seen in galleries of pictures open to public inspection. Finally, it is said that as a punishment for her perfidy, she will wander till she finds a man whom she will in vain endeavor to make swerve from his engagement, and it appears, they added, that as yet she had not succeeded. Having inquired what connection subsisted between this spirit and the old chaplain, of whom also I had heard mention, they informed me that the fate of the last depended on the young lady, because he had assisted her in her criminal conduct. but no one was able to give me any satisfactory information concerning the voice which had called the Duke by his name, nor on the meaning of the church being illuminated at night, and why the grand mass was chanted. No one either knows how to account for the dance on the mountain's top in the forest. For the rest, added the Marquis, you will own that the traditions are admirably adapted to my story, and may, to a certain degree, serve to fill up the gaps, but I am not enabled to give a more satisfactory explanation. I reserve for another time a second history of this same death bride. I only heard it a few weeks since. It appears to me interesting, but it is too late to begin today, and indeed, even now, I fear that I have intruded too long on the leisure of the company present by my narrative. He had just finished these words, and some of his auditors, though all thanked him for the trouble he had taken, were expressing their disbelief of the story, when a person of his acquaintance came into the room in a hurried manner and whispered something in his ear. Nothing could be more striking than the contrast presented by the bustling and uneasy air of the newly arrived person while speaking to the Marquis, and the calm air of the latter while listening to him. Haste, I pray you, said the first, who appeared quite out of patience at the Marquis's sang-froid. In a few moments you will have cause to repent this delay. I am obliged to you for your affecting solicitude, replied the Marquis, who in taking up his hat appeared more to do, as all the rest of the party were doing in preparing to return home, than from any anxiety of hastening away. You are lost, said the other, as he saw an officer enter the room at the head of a detachment of military, who inquired for the Marquis. The latter instantly made himself known to him. You are my prisoner, said the officer. The Marquis followed him, after saying adieu with a smiling air to all the party, and begging they would not feel any anxiety concerning him. What? Not feel anxiety, replied he whose advice he had neglected. I must inform you that they have discovered that the Marquis has been detected in a connection with very suspicious characters, and his death warrant may be considered as signed. I came in pity to warn him of his danger, for possibly he might then have escaped, but from his conduct since, I can scarcely imagine he is in his proper senses. The party, who were singularly affected by this event, were conjecturing 1,000 things when the officer returned and again asked for the Marquis. He just now left the room with you, answered someone of the company. But he came in again. We have seen no one. He has then disappeared, replied the officer, smiling. He searched every corner for the Marquis, but in vain. The house was thoroughly examined, but without success, and the following day the officer quitted the baths with his soldiers without his prisoner and very much dissatisfied. What? Where did... okay, there was so much going on in that. Okay, hang on. Because not my first, I don't know. There's been so many thoughts. Is he the chaplain? I feel like he might be the chaplain. But again, we're not supposed to look for explanations. But I feel like he's probably the oh, wait, unless he's... Hang on. Unless he was the jilted dude. What happened there? Wait, so the dude tells the story, officer comes in, says he's arrested, attempts to take him with him, then he disappears. Yes, exactly. See, and this would be a really interesting story to, like, analyze and look at all of the story parts of it, because it did. It had the story within a story, but it also had the story within a story within a story, and then there was the whole the unknown person, the mystery person at whatever event it was within the story, and then he's the mystery person within this event over here, and just all of the different parallels. So I do it would be, I would actually want to reread this again, just to try and like catch all the little things in it, because he has to be either the chaplain or the chaplain or the first dude who uh who died of a broken heart. I'm feeling like it's the chaplain though. And then yeah, just like like the entire time, just the stories within the stories, and then what's the truth, what's the fiction. I mean, it's all fiction, but is it? Is it? Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Like it does. It takes me back. It takes me back to my academic days, my days in academia, when like yeah, like that's what you do. You'd sit and you'd analyze and you'd go over, and it's just so good. It's all woven together. It's so good. Mm. And you never knew where it was going at any point. Oh, all right, yeah, based on a true story, exactly though. Hey, like it said there. Hang on, let me see if I can find the line. Something about all things are come from something. Yes, yet one could trace in your narration many traits resembling another history. Dun dun dun. And that would be the line you'd take out and like really highlight in your paper or your essay about this story. All bits and pieces taken and woven, and yeah. So yeah, that and then it did. It had drinking blood and champagne and a duel and um and a masked ball situation, which is always fun. It has it all. I'm so pleased. I do. I feel like I have read something like this before, but it was. Oh, it's so good, and it doesn't explain anything or everything or anything, and yeah. Mm. Heard a phrase today: history doesn't repeat itself, but it certain does like to rhyme. Ooh, I love that. That that's perfect. That honestly, that's perfect. Oh, yes, I do. I love it. It's excellent. Oh, I don't even know what else to say. Well, and that's the thing, and that's why this is one of those that I would just love to go over and just really pour over it and actually figure out what the likely all the things that are supposed to be indicative of something are, to actually puzzle out what the potential intention is supposed to be. Even if there isn't one, what do the signs point to? because it is. It's super curious. Ah, so good. Because, um, so, okay, I have a thought. So, the old chaplain. All right, so so there's a story within a story within a story within a story. So the death bride is a folk tale slash story within that area of the certain girl who was unfaithful to her lover. So that's why she is doomed to wander the earth, seducing dudes away from their ladies until such point as one of them says no. And then the chaplain is doomed to roam the earth as well. But again, it says here, the fate of the last depended on the young lady because he had assisted her in her criminal conduct. But no one was able to give me any satisfactory information concerning the voice, which da 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 da. So I wonder if no, I had to keep going with that. But no one was able to give me any satisfactory information concerning the voice which had called the Duke by his name, nor on the meaning of the church being illuminated at night, and why the grand mass was chanted. No one either knows how to account for the dance on the mountain's top in the forest. No, okay. So the chaplain assisted her, so his fate also depends on her being rejected. So okay, sorry. So when the so the Italian, when he was telling his story about being in his friend's castle with Ida and Filippo. No, sorry. With Ida and the Duke of Marino. The Duke apparently heard the Italian's voice on his way into the castle. So if the Italian is the chaplain probably tries to dissuade the dudes from actually going through with it. So that's why the Duke would have heard the Italian's voice on his way in, because the Italian is the chaplain. And he is trying to help so that he can be at peace. Kind of reminds you of the story where a woman was just unloyal to a samurai, so he cut her cheeks. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Again, where is it? Oh, no, where is it? History is the same, or your narrative has been. One could trace in your narration many traits resembling another history. But that's why it's so good, because there is a difference between, and we've talked about this before, in media. There's one thing about remaking something, doing the same thing over and over and over, and just taking bits and pieces from different places and putting it together in a different way. It's like a mosaic, rather than just completely like a terrible forgery or copy. Yeah. To make something new and interesting, and yeah. Oh, that was good. Okay, and here's the thing. So as soon as, where was it? So Ida and Hildegard, the twins. So Hildegard, the dead one, and Ida, the one who married the guy. So Ida left, and then the calm, apparently Ida, came into the room to dance with her groom, and then they went to the nuptial chamber. So earlier in the story, okay, so apparently the ghost of Hildegard was seen by the Duke, which is why he went to go seek Ida's hand in marriage. And then so they opened her vault and found her body preserved. So I definitely thought there was going to be some corpse. I don't want to really go into that. Um, corpse on Duke action for nuptial chamberness. So he was on the floor though. He ended up he was dead on the floor. So luckily there was nothing like that. New and interesting. Nah, that's scary. We need to rehash something familiar because I need another $1 million. Exactly though. Oh, it's so. But and here's the thing though. People they still get their money though because people still go and do that stuff. So if on one hand you can't blame them because people are still going and giving them money. That's why I don't pay for entertainment. Oh. And then I don't know, like you look at this, like stuff like this, and there's still so much room for new stuff. It's just a matter of but and then again, it is scary to do new stuff because people don't have the attention span for that anymore. Yep, people still buy it. Right. We live in a world where Activision pumps out a remaster for a 10-year-old game in the same year they release a remake of the same game. And here's the thing, if you do take an outside like third non-interested party view of it and put that situation into like a dystopian novel or TV series, whatever, and it fits. So like rant. We're living in that. And yet people wonder how you could ever like get to that point. It's because it's slow. The frog boils slowly. It is all of it. All of the media being in the rehashes, the poppy stuff. You almost got a gamer word there, but keeping it ladylike. Buy the Modern Warfare 2 remaster and get exclusive DLC in the Modern Warfare 2 reboot. Yeah, sounds awesome. Oh my god. The normie must consume. Yes. I mean, I do. I have my own theories on certain things which help because it's like the logic and the objectivity just does not seem to be there. Quality doesn't matter, just need to shovel content so they can consume. Don't let them reflect on anything. Oh, exactly. Well, that's another one of my philosophical bents, whatever, where it's basically just shoveling out sugar, and you need more sugar because your taste buds get so overwhelmed with it that you can't taste anything other than it. So you just need the more and the more. So what you got to do is you just got to cut out the sugar for a while and get more of a taste for those deeper flavors, more robust flavors than just the pure sugar. Yeah, that. Haha. But yeah. And yeah. I could go on. We could go on. But I don't know. I don't want to get too and again, like, and that's the thing. We have these conversations and we can lament the state of where things are at. But at least we still have stuff like this where it was good and it is good. This stuff still exists. So I don't know, like, sucks. Society is fundamentally down. Well, and that's okay. So maybe let's get into this a little bit. Do you believe in the cyclical nature of existence? Like it does. Like it gets prosperous and great, whatever, and then it inevitably has to be brought down again. But then eventually it builds back up again. You just want a little place of your own with a server for your media and a rack full of books. Yeah, though. Just honestly, I want a hangar hermitude. That's what I want. A hangar hermitude full of books and with good Wi-Fi. That's the dream. I was gonna bring that up. Bad times create good men create good times create weak men, weak men create bad times. I do. I think about that, and I haven't been saying it so frequently because it's yeah. You don't want to talk about that stuff when it's bad times. Seemingly so, you think? Yes. Question. Don't look it up. How do you spell Fruit Loops? Sorry, put you on the spot. Fruit Loops? No. See, here's the thing. I could have sworn. So, like the cereal or the da. I don't know what da is, so the cereal. Well, now I kind of gave it away. So the cereal. Which one would you have thought it was before I said anything? Honestly, you never paid attention to spelling as a kid. Was more concerned with shoveling sugar into your face. Okay, sounds good. Well, I do. I love this stuff because like this is somewhat off topic. I think it was just something that happened to me today. The whole Mandela effect. I had heard of the Fruit Loops one. And from what the Mandela effect. I had heard of the Fruit Loops one. And at the time of reading it, I could have sworn that when people were talking about it, they had thought that it was fruit, F-R-O-O-T, loops, L-O-O-P-S, but now it was fruit with regular fruit, loops. I was just in the store today, and it's F-R-O-O-T, loops now, again. So it's kind of freaking me out. De bears and stuff. And that one, okay, I have two reasons for being a EIN person. So which one are you? Or do you not care about the spelling either? I do. I have two reasons. One is personal, where like I will never think of it as any other way because of it. Well, they're both that way, but one is like it's only to a me thing, but then the other one is it's a very, very good argument. I'm sorry. You notice these all happen in the middle of the word, not the beginning or end. It's because we don't pay attention to the middle of the word. We see the beginning and ending letter along with the length, and then we assume the word. Okay, fair. I mean, but Berenstain is only 3 letters off of the end of the word. But shall I tell you my two arguments for Berenstein and not Berenstain? But I have seen those things where like they mix up the letters in the word. Well, and that's the thing, is because I can do that, and I get that and everything. However, I have an editor's brain. Hang on, let me look. If you can read this, you have a strong mind. Only smart people can read this. It doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The important thing is that the first and last letter be in the right place. And I always thought spelling was important. Is that it? Yeah, yep, I've definitely seen that. But here's the thing. So again, for me, I have an editor's brain, for one, and part of that comes from I am slightly synesthetic. So things are either right or they're wrong. I have like the grapheme synesthesia, so like words, letters, whatever, they have color. So again, they're either right or they're wrong, and that's why I have like the spelling thing, and like editing stuff is pretty like quick for me because again, it's right or it's wrong because if something is out of place, it's not the right color, it's not the right picture. So for Berenstein Bears, the A is not the right color. And for 2, so that's my personal one. It's not the right color. It's not. It's just not. And for 2, I remember talking to other kids about is the pronunciation Berenstain or Berenstein. And you wouldn't have that if it was straight up Berenstain with an A. So, those are my 2 arguments, and I think that they're pretty solid. Well, the one's pretty solid, and the other one's solid enough for me. So, yeah. Anyway. But, I don't know, it just... I love those sorts of things, even in stories. So, to even have that inkling that it might be in reality just kind of tickles me, and I kind of got to hang on to it a little bit. But I do. There's certain things that I accept and believe through personal experience that, again, looking at it maybe objectively, wouldn't otherwise. You just think people don't pay attention, but in the age of the internet, suddenly people get called out on something they never thought about. Sure, but again, and this is why this like really threw me today, because like I like the Mandela effect stuff, but it's always like, okay, so what would I be able to realize one that would I be able to realize one that had happened? And I specifically remember people talking about how they thought it was fruit, OOT, loops, but now it was regular fruit. And I thought that I looked it up too, and that's exactly what it was. But now we're back to the OOT loops. So, so I guess, so what are you saying about people getting called out on it? Like that it's not a thing? Or that... Because I know a lot of the things can be attributed to faulty memory or like mixing 2 things together, right? But that's why I'm very about like the truthfulness of it. So that's why I give it a little I hold on to it, but just like this. But then something like that happens. You always thought it was spelled weird because I before E except after C, but when you look in Google, it says weird. Right. But for something like that, since, like, yeah, a lot of times it's the I before E, so it would do that, and a lot of times people spell it that way because they think that as well. So, like, certain things like that are... What's the word? It has an explanation for it. You know what I mean? And, okay, so... How do you spell Chick-fil-A? You never think about it until someone brings it up. Then you become conscious of it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have thought about it. But again, but now we can think about it and recognize and look at those things. So, and that's why I try not to. I try not to just take those things for at face value. I do try and explain it away to a degree, or like figure out why it would have done that, right? But again, Berenstain Bears, and now the Fruit Loops. I promise, I am an objective person. So yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It yeah. It somehow fits with this. Like we were talking about like media and stuff and dystopian stuff. So then Mandela effect, obvious segue. You know how it is. So yeah. I don't know. That it did. It was just something that threw me today, and I figured I'd ask about it. See if it was just me. I don't think it is though. You know, you see the way people act and the severity of the dumb feels like you're getting radiation contact sickness watching it. That leaves a ton of room for stuff like the Mandela effect. Right, but again, that's the thing, is that's why like I don't take things that I am not particularly knowledgeable about or haven't had the experience with. So, but those two specific ones, like I do, though I have those experiences with. Other than that, I absolutely understand what you're talking about. So you can't take that stuff at face value, and a lot of it's always looking for the truth. Like what is the actual. There's a line in here too, wasn't there? Something about the fiction. Forgiveness for your fiction. I'm not sure it doesn't quite fit, but never mind. All right, sorry. But yeah, so I don't know if I already said it, but yeah, just not taking it at face value, being aware of your own stuff, and making sure you're not messing your own self up with it. So I don't know. Well, if at some point Fruit Loops changes back to FRUIT loops, then we will know for sure. Although at this point, the ones who are controlling the machinations, they won't try that one again because we're on to them. I'm sorry. It's getting late, isn't it? Well, luckily the stream worked. Yeah, my software servers were down apparently. So that's why I was so late. I apologize. But yeah. We got through it. Yes. And next time, next time the storm. So we'll see. We'll see that one. So yeah, sorry for getting so off topic and going into weird stuff, but I do. I like thinking of those things, and yeah, it's a thought exercise. It's all it is. Is it? Yes. You hope the storm has ball lightning in it? Oh, I do too. I think this one might actually be short. Yeah, I think this one's a short one. So hopefully it will. Not sure if it will. I do. I still have to read the sequel to the one series that I read that was, and the sequel is specifically Ball Lightning. And I'd be curious because the writing was super interesting in the actual series, so could be good. Could be good. Did you find out anything new about Ball Lightning, or have you been simply procrastinating with flying large planes across oceans? You kind of put it on hold as you work on stuff. You kind of phase between long-term projects so that you don't get burned out. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. And I'm sure Ball Lightning would do a good deal of burning out. Ha ha ha. Electricity joke. Sorry. All right, sounds good. Well, when you find out anything else, definitely let me know. I'd be super curious. Yeah. So that was Fantasmagoriana, Tales of the Dead. Shoot, what were they called again? The Death's Head and the Death Bride. So that was interesting. Those, they are. I like how different all of them are, and yet the same. Rhyming in history. Haha. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Apparently, I'm getting intensely delirious. So, you do need resources on the mineral composition of the earth so you can find locations that have higher than average concentration of minerals supposedly conducive to producing ball lightning. Okay. So how does one find such resources or acquire such resources? You don't know where to find that stuff. I'll see what I can do. I'm pretty good at finding stuff. We'll see. And it's so on the mineral composition of the earth. Okay. So ball lightning and minerals. So whatever is likely to. Yeah. Okay. All right. Cuz so again, it's been a while. So it's the lightning, right? The lightning is supposed to like either strike the ground or strike stuff in the air. So, and I guess where do we how much do we know about the composition of ball lightning? Is it like, does it strike and then condense into a ball, or because of I don't know. Again, I can't remember quite like what is already known about ball lightning and what is still a mystery. Because I guess where my question was going is the mineral like deep, not deep in the earth, but is it like within the earth, or is it like surface of the earth, or is it stuff that gets kicked up into the air? Apparently there would be a strike of lightning that then results in a ball of lightning remaining behind and lurking. Couldn't you just like and I guess, does it depend on the power of the lightning, or like you can like create artificial lightning kind of, right? Because then why couldn't you just like strike different minerals and see if it creates a little ball or something in a lab? I don't know. Okay, all right. There would be a strike of lightning that then results in a ball of lightning remaining behind and lurking, like on the ground or in the air. Okay, so the minerals noted in the spectrograph were silicon, iron, and calcium. Okay. I wonder what is specific about those. See, now you're getting me into things where I'm going to be procrastinating on things, and I have a lot of stuff to do. Still going to do it. Okay, yeah. I will. I'll find a chance. If I forget, remind me because I am actually curious. But yeah, I definitely will. I'm gonna be looking into this a little bit at least. Like I said, I do have plain stuff to do, which is very important. But they have okay. They have created ball lightning in a controlled environment, but we can't be sure that method is what causes it in the wild until observed. Oh, okay. So then, okay, so then it's one of those things like what you're saying. You need to find kind of where it's most likely to occur, and it's basically like hunting a rare Pokemon. You just have to go there and just wait and watch and hope. Sounds exhausting. I.e., they could be achieving the end result with a different method. Right. Well, but and that's why you find that you figure out that method, and then you kind of like figure out figure out where the minerals are and what circumstances are most likely to cause it, and then just go sit. You need to see where it's most likely to occur and see if there's a correlation of ball lightning reports. Okay, sure. And then if you can narrow that down, then it's more possible to record it. Okay. Do you need specific I assume you would. You would need specific equipment in order to like actually get proper data. I'm sorry, I'm getting way too into this, but Just need to point a camera as some silicone iron and calcium during a thunderstorm and see if it do the thing. Okay, so again, the ball lightning. Is it in the air or is it on the ground or in the ground? See if it do the thing. Again, yeah, that sounds exhausting. Well, like not exhausting per se, but that's yeah. Not sure if I have the patience for that. It's in the air, but the lightning would have to make contact with the ground since, well, that's where the minerals are. Right. So again, lightning strike ground where minerals are. And then it condense into ball in air for a little bit, and then it disappear. Does it do anything like different to the ground than like a regular lightning strike? So cloud to ground lightning strike. Okay. And so do they... Right, there's reports that it phases through walls, but that could be the magnetic field of the storm/earth causing hallucinations. What do you mean that it phases through walls? Like lightning strike ground, ball lightning appear, go through a wall? That could be the magnetic field of the storm/earth causing hallucinations. And that's what I was gonna ask, because so it moves. In what way does it move? Well, and that's I remember this. We talked about this a little bit too. That some of it could be hallucinations. So, or like not even necessarily hallucinations. Like, is it something in the eye? Like, you know how magnesium, right? I'm pretty sure it's magnesium, gets all bright and flashes, right? When you burn it. Like, could that be doing something where the lightning strikes some sort of mineral and it like makes a specifically bright or certain whatever in the eye, and then it just looks like there's a ball there? You know what I mean? Yeah, basically. And it just kind of coasts around. See, the strong magnetic field can cause disturbances with the frontal lobe of the brain, so you could be seeing visual artifacts as a result. Right. See, but that's what's weird though, because you did say that they created ball lightning in a lab. So, like, and again, and say, just theorize with me for a moment. Say all of the ball lightning in nature. Do we know that there is or has been actual ball lightning? Because say if there wasn't, and it was just like a visual thing, but we still created ball lightning, even though it didn't exist in the wild. You know what I mean? That would be cool. I mean, it's still cool, but I don't know. Science. So it coasts around and doesn't disturb anything else, though? In a lab. There's been ball lightning in a lab, right? A Chinese team supposedly filmed it in China, which is why we have the spectral analysis. Right, but that's what I'm saying is, say the phenomenon itself was just straight hallucinatory. They filmed it in nature, you should say. Okay. So it's not something where it would like do something similar to the lens of a camera that it would to the eye, or they're distinct enough that getting it on film is like, yes, it does exist. And is it dangerous? Does it disrupt anything else? Like, does it have, like, so lightning strike ground, make glass, or just take down tree, or something like that, right? Does ball lightning do anything that we know of? Bring up all the procrastination research that you did. I need to know all of the answers. If there's a strong magnetic field, then your camera is going to have major artifacting. So you wouldn't worry about that too much. Wouldn't worry about what specifically. Honestly, at this point, I'm not sure I remember much of what I've been saying. So, like static and distortion, not really bright lights. Okay, appearing in the image that aren't real. Okay, all right, cool. All right, I like it. But yeah, so then again, like, yeah, what does it do? Is it the same? I don't know how to. What's the word? Is it the same composition of lightning, but just in a ball? So like, if it say fell down or hit something, it would bleh. It just kind of exists for a bit, then disappears. Well, so well, okay. So then like I mean, would that kind of be like a string snapping from both ends? Like lightning from cloud go to ground, it snaps and it blah, 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 which is a technical term. Yeah, apparently it's literally just a ball of lightning. So yeah, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like the string snapped from both ends and it went. I like my theory. So when there's lightning, okay. So, and I'm sorry, probably stupid questions, but lightning come from cloud, go to ground. Does it travel or no? So what's the actual like movement of lightning? I know, again, stupid question. I don't know how things work. I'm sorry. Considering the method, it was produced in the lab and the presence of conductive metals in the analysis, you assume the metals are creating a contained magnetic field. So it'd be like catching lightning in a bottle. Oh, that's cool. Ooh, I like that. That's super cool. I like that. I like that. I like that conclusion. We should just conclude that it's that. Because it's fun. Like, momentary lightning in the bottle. With lightning striking the ground, it can go both ways. It can go cloud to ground to cloud, or sometimes a little bit of both. Okay. Is there a way that you can tell which one it is per lightning strike? I'm sorry. But I must know. Sometimes you'll see a leader coming out of the ground to meet lightning coming down. Okay, okay. So it is basically getting it recorded and going frame by frame and seeing which way it's coming from. Usually ground to cloud splits and spreads up in the cloud. Okay. Well, would that be a potential thing too? Like, depending on which one it is it more likely to come from one or the other? Is ball lightning like more likely to come from one or the other? Almost like a flower. Oh, I like that. Oh, we need more storms. I miss storms. I just think they're pretty. I don't know anything about them. I think they're pretty. I doubt it. Either one should do the trick. Okay. Okay. If you say so. Just offering theories. Very uneducated theories. Unless the metals lead more positive or negative. Hmm. 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 Which you should probably check. Haha. There you go. Oh. Hmm. But yeah, that's I don't know. That's what I like to do is I like to find all the different variables and figure out which ones fit where. So that's where I'm good at things. Knowing things is less my because there's positive and negative lightning. Right. So there you go. Aha. Ha. How do you tell which one it is? Positive lightning usually flickers many times, very quickly. Okay. Okay. So it is. It's just the stuff that kind of blah, 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 blah. That would be the positive. Again, an intensely technical term. I'm sorry. Negative lightning is usually just one singular powerful strike. Can leave chains of lightning. Interesting. So then would that be a thing? Does the ball lightning come more from, I don't know, it almost sounds like it'd come from the negative. But I could be wrong. I'm likely wrong. So yeah, looking at that sort of stuff. All the different variables, which one is more, has it happen more? If you had to guess, perhaps negative lightning is more prone to causing ball lightning. Yes! Yes! I hypothesized similarly. So we're going to say that that's correct. Interesting. So then, yeah, like it is. It's a very special set of circumstances. It's just, what are those circumstances? So that's why you just look at all the variables and figure that out. Haha! I love that. That's so much fun. It's a puzzle. It's an equation. Because you can see little beads left over on particularly powerful negative strikes. What do you mean beads? Because, I mean, that sounds kind of like ball. Like, yeah. So, I need to understand what beads means. It's kind of like ball lightning, but they just burn out really fast. Kind of like sparks after a short. Right. So it's just a giant spark in certain circumstances. So, depending, it's just what is the variable there that allows it to exist longer? Is it the certain type of materials, or is it like an amount of materials? Is it a combination of materials? I like this. This is fun. Again, you did all the research. I'll just ask all the dumb questions until something actually like comes up. That's what I'm good for. The dumb questions that eventually lead somewhere, kind of, maybe. But yeah, so it is. It's just like a short on a large scale. The materials may shape a magnetic field that would contain more electrical energy, allowing for basically a long-lived bead of lightning. Yeah. And is it like a certain, again, the combination, is it a certain like 3 parts this to 2 parts that to 1 part that? Is it how it's arranged? Is it like, yeah. So a super bead. I like that. Ball lightning or super bead lightning? I like both. Ball lightning, aka super bead lightning. I like it. I do. Like we could go we could go on and on about this. Like I do. At some eventually we're gonna figure this out. And we're gonna make lots and lots of money on it. Anyways, you need to find locations with abnormally high levels of iron, silicone, and calcium sulfate. And again, is it, does it not does it have to be in the ground, but is it also something where there's enough of it that gets kicked up? Do you know what I mean? Like, is it the fact that it's in the earth, or is there something with it getting, they got to be well, you're right, got to be mostly exposed to the air, right? But is the ball lightning more likely to form when it's on the ground, or is that stuff getting kicked up into the air, and like that's a contributing factor? Or again, is it just like the amount of it, or like the distribution of it? Not too heavy, it'd have to be on the surface. Okay, all right. Okay, all right. Again, that's why I asked the dumb questions, and you put me back on the correct path. Interesting. Okay. I do. I'm gonna have to go to bed. We're gonna keep coming back to this because honestly, it's fascinating as hell. So you can dump a bunch of resources if you want. See, I do. I kind of like you being the resources, and again, me asking the dumb questions. Because if I read too much, then I won't be able to ask the dumb questions. And you do mean a lot. I have commercial to practice. I have commercial to learn and to practice. You can send them to me. I cannot promise that I will go through them. At least not right now. Because I do. I really do like this stuff. It's... Yeah, go ahead and send me them. Go ahead and send me them. And maybe I will have slightly more educated questions the next time we come back to this topic. Speaking of, whenever you want, we can go over side slips. Sure, can stream your POV to you and explain your methods. Sure, that sounds good. And again, I do. I really just need to practice it because the like I can't remember, one of my lessons, my first lessons back with my number one instructor, he had me do a simulated engine out, or the power off 180 without telling me he was doing it, and then he told me to slip it, and I was literally telling myself, okay, you put the rudder in and the aileron opposite, and my brain just would not let me do that. So I do. I know I just need practice, but like to some degree, I'm not actually horrendous. I do know how to do the thing, but it's just for some reason. Don't think, just do. I know, but I'm bad at that. It should be automatic. I know, and that's why I gotta practice it. I do. I overthink all the time. My instructor tells me that all the time. I'm sure he's exasperated, but I know. I'm working on it. But yeah, so I do. Getting the technique down would be definitely good, and just generally practicing it. So yeah, we'll figure that out. It'll be good. I am looking forward to that because I do. That's one of the things that I do need to really get down. So, yes. So that was Fantasmagoriana. Tales of the Dead, The Death's Head, Death Bride, and then philosophical and scientific discussions. Yeah. So many things to pack into one Thursday. So yeah, so I haven't figured out I haven't looked at what games to do for Sunday, or what game maybe, but we'll do something Halloweeny, and then on Tuesday again we will once more try VATSIM. I will try not to be such a big baby, and I will try to actually be able to do VATSIM, actual ATC stuff. And commercial maneuvers as usual, and slippage. So we're gonna get it down. This is more or less what you do in your free time. It sounds like a good time. So yeah, I do. Yeah, if you ever got lost and found your way here, or found your way back, I wonder why you keep coming back, because like, what is this? But I appreciate it. I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate that you apparently enjoy it as well. So yeah, so thank you. And for putting up with my dumb questions. Like a little toddler asking why. I just never grew out of that phase. So yes, again, as always, thank you for putting up with me. And yeah, hope to see you again soon. And yeah, if I forgot anything, brain has been checked out for a while, I think, at this point. But yeah. Nah, if you can't explain it to someone, then you clearly don't understand it. I take some. Oh no. Okay. I take some issue with that because there are limits to language, and because have you've heard of certain concepts in certain languages that you can't fully translate into English, right? So there, and I love language, but I do recognize that it is a there are limitations because it's just the external expression of the internal mind, the internal workings. So, and as somebody who, again, has like the synesthesia stuff where I can't exactly tell you what's happening and how it's happening, it still, it's, it still is. So, yeah. There are exceptions, but 99.9% of the time you should be able to teach a concept assuming you truly understand it. No, and that's absolutely fair. Like that's why I agree with that to a lot of an extent. But if not, then you likely don't understand it yourself. Well, okay, so okay, so say you're just learning a new language. You know in your language how to explain it, but you don't have the words to explain it to somebody else. Right? So, if the way that you understand it is not in a language that other people understand, does that mean that you don't understand it? But we both speak English. I am being metaphorical. You know what I mean? I'm talking figuratively. So, like, someone can explain something very scientifically, very technically, but if the other person and they understand it fully, but if that other person doesn't understand the words that are being used, then that's not a fault on their part, but it's uh, a hindrance. You can't explain it in French because you don't know French. If you knew French, then you could explain it in French. I understand that, but what I'm saying is, I'm saying, this is what I'm saying. If you don't have an understandable, even if it is English, like when people talk technically about something and they're like, can you explain it to me in English? You are speaking English, you just don't know the words. You know what I mean? You're just messing with me now because you're just pretending not to understand, because then it makes it seem like I don't understand what I'm talking about, which is the very nature of what we're discussing at the moment. And you're making a point, except my point is valid and excellent. We have the same language and the sufficient ability to convey concepts. That's why you avoid using technical jargon. Sure. But how far do you have to dumb it down in order to well, and okay, and that's something too. Gosh darn it, keep getting me on other things when I need to be going to bed. So how far do you dumb it down? Are you like, do you have to be able to dumb it down in order for sorry, that's like a terrible way of putting it, but how far do you have to dumb it down in order for you to apparently be able to understand it? You know what I mean? And like it is there's all sorts of things can be boiled down to a simple concept, but it does take away so much of what there is, so much substance from it. So there's definitely got to be a balance there. In this particular case, not much, kind of up to speed more or less. Wait, so what what are we dumbing down for me? I forgot where we came into this. Hang on. Oh, okay, discussing the ball lightning and stuff. Okay, sure. I wasn't sure which specific thing we were at. Again, we've discussed a lot of things this even. So, okay. Right, but again, like that is a very subjective thing because again, who are you explaining it to? Are you explaining, do you have to explain it to a child in order for you to fully understand how it works? And then again, how much of what it actually is are you losing in that explanation? And I absolutely get what you're saying, and um I agree with it to a degree. Well, you love teaching, and you dare say you're quite good at it, so you can probably achieve that. Okay, but again, it depends on the strengths of people. What if you're just not a good teacher? You can understand all the things, but you're not a good teacher. That said, you do simplify things depending on how casual the conversation is. Sure, and that is. And I'm definitely not like against doing that. Like that is, you're trying to, I'm very for that. Being able to convey in the simplest terms things so that you can impart the idea. However, there's a balance, and there's like a middle to this, and there's shades. Oh. Honestly, I think at this point I'm just kind of like not arguing, but just kind of arguing for the sake of argument, just because, yeah. Because I like countering things, and yeah, trying to really flesh it out. So I apologize. Anyway, all right, I gotta go to bed. This was, as always, fun. We haven't done this in a while. Just the um going off on all sorts of things. Long story short, you have to understand the concept in order to teach it. That's fair. So if you can teach it, then that's a good indication that you understand it. What? Freaking A. Okay, so this VOD is gonna be hella weird. Nobody watches my VOD. Like, let's be real. This is why. That's why we can do this. So, what do you consider to be teaching? Because, and I assume I know where you're gonna go with this, but you can, like, people can just spout out the same stuff and, like, this person, like, basically game a telephone. Teaching equals transferring knowledge and understanding the concept. Sure, okay. I'm not sure everybody would, well, I'm not sure all teaching would agree with that definition or follow that definition. You know what I mean? Because, like, just as a potential, like, you don't do that regurgitation BS schools do. That's what I'm saying, though. So, but that's the thing, is you don't, even if you have that regurgitation BS, that's called mimicking, right? Even if you have that regurgitation BS, you hopefully can still have those certain students who do enjoy that stuff enough to eventually get to the point where they do, I don't know, fully understand it and actually get into it. And you know what I mean? I was going somewhere with that. In coding, it's called print. So just like ripping off other people's code. I don't know. I should have kept up with computer science. That would have been fun. However, I did not, so I don't know. Print hello world. Right. Hello world. Right. Okay. Fair. Well, and that's another topic we could get into. However, I'm just gonna throw a little bit out there. Ugh. So there's an ideal for how schooling should be, how kids should be taught. Is it feasible in today's world? With the amount of children and the amount of different personalities of children. Yeah. So that's a question. But also, and that's why you need to teach kids how to love to learn, and that way they can do the learning on themselves and look for the stuff, like with you and like me, where we research the stuff that interests us and we figure that stuff out on our own. No children are brought up to be dumb and entitled. Yes, sure. So they can't appreciate any. Wait. So are you saying no, comma, children are brought up to be dumb and entitled? Or no children are brought up to be dumb and entitled? Do you get what I mean? Where there's a distinction between what that. I'm not quite sure if you're saying one thing or the other. No, children are. Some children are. A lot of children are. So they can't appreciate anything given. Right. Or no children, or even better, no. Children are brought up. No, that's. Yeah. But and that's a thing. That's one of the things too, where it's like there's the whole thing where parents don't want their kids to have to want like they did. But look where it got you. If you learn to never want, you're always going to be wanting. So yeah. Anyway, okay. This is just gonna keep on keeping on. I have to go to bed. I must go to bed. Don't bring up anything any more interesting because I'm gonna keep going on tangents and stuff, and I'm gonna be very, very tired tomorrow and for the rest of the weekend and week and stuff. So this has been fun. It has. Oh my gosh, I did. I miss this stuff. So again. Thanks for being up for it. We should be doing this in Discord or something, but hey, it's not my stream. Like I said, nobody watches my VODs. It's fine. It's alright. It's great. But yeah, anyway. So again, thanks for being here. And yeah. And bringing in interesting things, interesting observations and thoughts. And yeah, all the things. Yeah, I think that's it. So, thanks again. Have a great whatever it's gonna be for you. Good night. I know it's a good night. So thanks. And until next time, bye.